Her children were murderers, though no court could ever convict them. They used no poison, no weapon, only the slow, meticulous erosion of a mother's spirit. It all began with a padlock on her own refrigerator. In the house Alice Gutierrez built with her own hands in Maple Creek, Pennsylvania, the final war for her dignity began not with a shout, but with the cold, metallic click in her very own kitchen. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they can shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. Her heels ached, but her heart ached more, because for days her children had been acting strange. When she arrived, she froze. "Well, we didn't know if you were going to wake up," Veronica replied, not looking up from her phone. "We just made enough for ourselves," Cole added without lifting his head. Alice swallowed hard, took a step toward the refrigerator to make herself something, even just an egg, but when she grabbed the handle, something stopped her. A metallic click, a cold resistance. It was a padlock. They had put a padlock on the fridge, in her house, in her kitchen, on her refrigerator. "What is this?" she said in a low voice, almost trembling. Raymond let out a sigh of annoyance. "It's a precaution, Mom. You forget to close things properly. Several things have already spoiled because of you, and also because there isn't enough money for so many expenses," Veronica added. Alice didn't answer. She lowered her gaze, pursed her lips, and with moist eyes, went straight to the pantry. She only found a piece of stale, hard bread, hard as a rock, and half a packet of instant coffee. She sat in the rocking chair on the back porch, and as she chewed the bread as if it were cardboard, she thought, "When did my children stop loving me?" It hadn't been a sudden change, but a slow, creeping frost that had settled over their home for years. It began after Walter passed. At first, it was small things. Forgotten birthdays, conversations cut short, a general impatience with her slowness. Then came the suggestions that she should sell her jewelry, that the house was too big for her, that her opinions were outdated. For a decade, Alice had slowly retreated into herself, becoming a ghost in the house she had built. She had convinced herself this was just how families changed, how children grew busy. But the padlock wasn't a change, it was a declaration. It was the final brick in a wall they had been building around her heart for 10 long years. Now, let's get back to Alice, because that very morning, as she was being served leftovers, she would begin to remember things she had spent years trying to forget. As she rose from the rocking chair, the front door swung open. It was Raymond, returning from a quick trip to the store. Alice didn't need to turn around to know it was him. He always entered as if the world owed him something, his every step a constant complaint. "Outside again, Mom?" he snapped, his tone sharp enough to hurt more than a scream. "It's cold, Mom." "Get inside," Raymond ordered, closing the door behind him. They went into the kitchen. Raymond placed a folder on the table, adjusted his reading glasses, and took out some papers. "What's that?" Alice asked, noticing the logo of a real estate agency. "Nothing that concerns you," he replied without looking at her. "It's work stuff." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think she still had some space in her children's lives, but something in her chest told her he was lying. She had known him since he was a baby. She knew when Raymond was hiding something, and he was doing it right then. "Is it about the house?" she asked carefully, as if testing the waters. "What?" No, don't start, Mom. I already told you not to worry about these things. I just asked." "Well, don't ask," he cut her off sharply. "Look, you've lived a long life, Mom. We're the ones who have to figure out how to move forward. The house isn't functional anymore. It's old, damp. And if it collapses with you inside, then the problem is mine." Alice gritted her teeth. Old, damp, useless. It was as if he was talking about the house, but also about her. "Your father and I built this house," she said in a firm voice. "Every brick, every penny. You were raised here. Yes, and we thank you for it, okay? But the world changes. We can't live in the past." Raymond took the papers and went straight to the back room, the one that used to be Walter's. He closed the door. Alice stood there, feeling a pang in her stomach. She didn't know if it was hunger or fear. Minutes later, Veronica came in through the back door, talking on the phone, smiling as if nothing was wrong. She was carrying grocery bags, but not for her. She didn't even greet her. Alice only managed to overhear a phrase amid the noise of the cell phone. Yes, the appraiser said we could get up to $1 million if we fix the issue with the will. Alice's blood ran cold. The will. They were talking about the house. Suddenly, all the strange behavior, the whispers, and the cold shoulders made a terrifying kind of sense. It wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It was about $1 million. And as that chilling realization washed over her, it would trigger a memory, a promise from long ago that she had almost forgotten. She climbed the stairs slowly, as if each step led her to a more painful reality. She entered her room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. She looked at the wall where the wedding portrait with Walter still hung. Both of them, young, happy, full of dreams. It was then that she remembered, not just a sentence, but an entire evening. Walter had just come from a difficult doctor's appointment. He sat on that same bed, his usual warmth replaced by a somber gravity. "Alice," he had said, taking her hand, "love can make you strong, but it can also make you blind. Our children, they love us, but they love what we can give them more. I've seen it in Raymond's eyes when he looks at the deed, in Veronica's voice when she talks about inheritance." He squeezed her hand. "If I'm ever gone, your love for them might make you too forgiving. So I'm leaving you more than just memories. I'm leaving you a shield. Promise me you'll look for it." At the time, she had dismissed it as the melancholy of a sick man. Now, his words were a chilling prophecy. Alice got up, opened the drawer where she kept Walter's clothes, and began to search among old shirts, folded receipts, and worn-out planners. Nothing. Everything smelled of dust and the past. She knelt beside the wardrobe, that old pine wood piece of furniture that Walter had bought at a flea market. She ran her fingers over it, touching the back, the sides. Something was wrong. There was a gap she hadn't felt before, a separation in the wood, a false panel. She knocked with her knuckles. It sounded hollow, but she had no way to open it. At that moment, from downstairs, she heard Veronica's voice. "Mom, Raymond says, you'll have to sign some papers tomorrow. Don't pretend you're asleep." Alice stood still in front of the wardrobe, her hands pressed against the cool wood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent room. For years, her primary emotion had been a quiet, gnawing sorrow. But now, something else was stirring. It wasn't just the hot flash of rage, it was the slow, awakening burn of defiance. It was the memory of the woman who had laid bricks alongside her husband, the woman who had nursed 3 children through fevers and heartbreaks. That woman hadn't died. She had just been dormant. As Veronica's impatient voice called from downstairs, Alice closed her eyes. She didn't just make a decision, she made a promise to the woman she used to be. The quiet years were over. Alice came down the stairs, her gaze still fixed on her own hands. She had been locked in her room for over half an hour, touching that piece of furniture as if she could open it with the force of memory. She said nothing, made no noise, just descended with that silent gait people have when they feel something slipping through their fingers, but they don't yet know what it is. Upon reaching the kitchen, she found Veronica taking some containers out of the fridge. She didn't even look at her. "It's your turn to sweep the patio today, right?" she asked, as if they were roommates, not mother and daughter. Alice nodded. It wasn't the first time they had spoken to her like that, but something inside her was starting to make noise, a new noise, as if there was no more room for resignation inside her. Veronica placed a plate on the table with cold rice and half an overripe banana. "Here, if you don't like it, there's old bread in the pantry, but you're not going to be making demands, okay?" Alice said nothing. She walked slowly to the table, sat down, and began to eat in silence. The rice tasted like nothing. The banana had black spots. She chewed slowly, as if afraid that plate would be her last of the day. While she was eating, she heard the front door open. It was Beatrice. "Excuse me," she said from the entrance. "I have some leftover oatmeal cookies. Is Alice here?" Veronica came out of the kitchen. "She's eating. But don't worry. You don't need to bring her things. We take care of her." Beatrice smiled, a toothless smile, but her eyes didn't smile with her. I'm just stopping by to say hello, if you'll let me. She walked in without waiting for an answer and peeked into the kitchen. Seeing Alice eating that sad plate of food, she felt a lump in her throat. How are you, my friend? I brought you some cookies. They're not the expensive kind, but they're good. Alice looked up, and for the first time in days, she smiled genuinely. She motioned for her to come closer. Beatrice sat next to her. I only have a little coffee left, Alice said, but it's enough for both of us. One to share is enough, Beatrice replied. While they shared the coffee, Veronica went into her room, leaving the door ajar. From there, Alice heard her talking on the phone. Her tone was soft, but the words stabbed like needles. Yes, the appraiser already came. He says if we remodel the bathroom and paint the facade, the house's value could easily go up. My mom has no say in it. She's old. She'll sign whatever we tell her to. She doesn't even realize what's going on. Beatrice looked at her. Alice looked back. They didn't say a single word, but in that exchange of glances, there was an entire conversation. In that silent gaze, Alice saw more than just a neighbor. She saw the only person who still brought her cookies without expecting anything in return, the only one who asked about her aching heels, the only one whose eyes didn't slide past her as if she were part of the furniture. In a world that had shrunk to the size of her lonely room, Beatrice was a window. She was the proof that kindness hadn't vanished from the world. It had just moved next door. Beatrice finished her coffee, and before leaving, she squeezed her arm firmly. Come over to my house later. I want to show you something. It's important. Alice nodded. Then she picked up her plate, washed it patiently, cleaned the table, and went to the patio to sweep. Out there, while shaking the dry dirt from between the dead flower pots, Alice thought about the phone call, the wardrobe, and Walter's phrase that had been echoing in her mind for days. There are things no one else should find before you. But what things? Suddenly, she heard Cole's voice from the entrance. Mom, Veronica says to take your clothes off the line. We have some visitors coming tomorrow. Who's coming? Some man. He says he's going to check on a few things. Nothing serious. Cole disappeared without waiting for an answer. Alice dropped the broom. Her throat went dry. She looked back at the kitchen, where the padlock remained firmly on the refrigerator like a visible scar. She went up to Walter's room again. She touched the wardrobe, checked one more time, and this time she noticed a faint scratch on the wood, as if someone else had already tried to open it before. Someone who wasn't her. The scratch on the wood wasn't old. Alice knew it as she touched it, tracing it with her fingertip. It was a new mark, faint, but not accidental. And in this house, coincidences no longer existed. Someone had tried to open the back of the wardrobe but hadn't succeeded. And that someone wasn't her. She remained silent. She took a long, deep breath and let the air clear some of the rage growing inside her. Then she descended the stairs slowly and walked straight to the house next door. Beatrice was waiting for her with a cup of hot cinnamon tea and 2 pieces of scones. I saw you from my window. You had that look on your face when something is eating you up inside, the neighbor said bluntly. What happened now? Alice sat down. She didn't answer right away. She took the scone carefully, took a sip of the tea, and then, with her gaze lost on the faded floral plastic tablecloth, she said, Veronica is hiding something. I know it. And Raymond, too. There's something strange about all this. Yesterday I heard them talking to an appraiser about the property. In the house. They say they're going to sell it, that I just have to sign, as if I were a piece of old furniture. But Walter... He told me he had left something hidden, something I was supposed to find. Beatrice lowered her voice, leaned in a little. Did you know that many years ago, Walter came to see me one afternoon? He was serious, strange. He told me he was afraid of what his children might do to you, that he didn't trust Raymond. Alice looked up, surprised. You never told me that. Because he asked me not to. He gave me an envelope. He told me not to open it, to keep it, and only to give it to you if one day you asked for it, or if something very serious happened. For the first time in a very long time, Alice didn't feel completely alone. A secret, kept safe for years by a loyal friend, was now within reach. What could Walter have possibly written that he knew would be so important all these years later? Let's stay with Alice as she finds out. Alice was speechless, her heart pounding, but she said no more. That conversation was enough to confirm what she suspected. Walter had foreseen something, and that something was beginning to happen. They spent the afternoon talking like two women who share the same wound, the same disillusionment, that of having given everything and receiving abandonment in return. It was almost dark when Alice returned home. Veronica was waiting for her in the living room, sitting as if she had been counting the seconds. "Where have you been?" she asked, her arms crossed. "With Beatrice." "With that woman again? You should stop telling her your business. She's not your family." Alice looked at her fixedly. "For the first time in a long time, my family doesn't recognize me anymore." Veronica snorted and headed for the patio, leaving a thick silence behind her. Alice went up to her room, sat on the bed, and opened an old wooden box she had kept for years. Inside were her notebooks from when she and Walter were just starting out, their wedding day photos, and a couple of old receipts, including the one for the first payment on the land. She remembered that day as if it were yesterday. It was 1,972. Walter was only 27. She was 24. The land was on a vacant lot of loose dirt, with no electricity, no paved street. Nobody wanted to live there, but they saw it with different eyes. "We're going to build our house here," Walter said, planting his feet firmly on the dust. "And where are we going to get the money?" she asked, laughing. "I've already saved it up. I worked double shifts for months, and Mr. Arthur, the metal worker, lent me the rest." "And what if we can't do it?" she insisted. "We will, because we're doing this for them," he said, stroking her belly. "For our children, but especially for you." Alice returned to the present, with her eyes full of tears. She clutched the receipt in her fingers as if it were a shield, a proof, a warning. Suddenly, she heard a noise in the hallway. It was Cole. "Mom," he said in a low voice. "Raymond is coming tomorrow with a notary. They're going to need you to sign some papers. They didn't tell me exactly what they're for, but you know how he gets if someone refuses." Alice looked at him from the doorway. "And what do you think, Cole?" He lowered his head. "I just don't want any trouble." And he left. She closed the door slowly, sat back down on the bed. There was no more room for doubt. Something big was being cooked up behind her back. She didn't sleep that night. She just waited for dawn, because on the other side of the wall, Beatrice was keeping a sealed envelope that had been closed for decades, and Alice was ready to ask for it. From before noon, Veronica was bustling around like a bee in someone else's kitchen. She moved from one side of the house to the other, moving furniture, mopping with more force than necessary, and putting dishes in the oven without asking for help. Alice, sitting in the rocking chair on the patio, watched everything with a silence that was becoming increasingly heavy. Something was cooking, and it wasn't just food. "I have company tonight," Veronica said as she dried a crystal glass. "So please, stay in your room. I don't want any scenes or questions. Got it?" Alice looked at her without moving. "Company? Friends from work? But an important man is also coming who is helping us with a matter. You don't need to know more. And why do I have to hide?" "It's not hiding," Veronica replied impatiently. "It's so you'll be more comfortable. You say things that are out of place, and I don't want people to think we live poorly here. Do you understand?" Alice lowered her gaze. She nodded with a barely visible movement. She didn't have the strength to argue. Not yet. The afternoon passed amidst dishes, fake laughter, background music, and the aroma of pot roast. From her room, Alice could hear everything. Veronica's exaggerated laughter, the forced conversations, and a male voice she didn't recognize, but which spoke with ease, as if the house were his. "And is this property free of legal problems?" That man asked between bites. "Completely," said Veronica. "The house is in my mom's name, but she gave us authorization for everything. The notary is coming tomorrow to review the papers and sign." "Everything's smooth." Alice clenched her fist. Her heart pounded in her chest. Authorization. Everything's smooth. She had given permission. She didn't even know exactly what they were talking about, but whatever it was, they were doing it without her. And worst of all, they were using her as a decorative figure, as an obstacle to be moved. A little later, someone knocked on her door. It was Cole. with a tray in his hands. He brought her a cold dinner, saltless rice, reheated beans, and a stiff tortilla. "Sorry, Mom," he said in a low voice, "but there wasn't much left over." Alice looked at him for a long time. She said nothing, just took the plate and closed the door gently. She ate in silence. With each spoonful, she thought of Walter's eyes, of the promise he had made her, of the document that Beatrice still kept, and how for the first time she didn't feel completely alone. Around 9 o'clock at night, when the house had returned to silence and the guests had left, Alice went out to the patio with a blanket over her shoulder. She sat in her usual chair, looking up at the stars, letting the cool air dry the tears she could no longer hold back. It was then that she heard footsteps on the gravel. Beatrice was crossing the side path that connected both houses. "I already heard they locked you in today," she said, sitting down next to her. "They hid me," Alice corrected. "We won't allow that anymore." Both were quiet for a moment. Then Beatrice took something out of her shawl, an old yellowish envelope with Walter's handwriting on the front. "Here is what your husband gave me. He told me that if things ever got ugly, you would know when to open it. And I think that day has come." Alice took it with both hands, looked at it as if it had fire inside, and without hesitating any longer, she tucked it under her blouse, against her chest. "Thank you, my friend. Tomorrow, when they come with their notaries and their lies, you won't be alone anymore." Alice didn't answer, just nodded, looking at the sky. But inside, something had already awakened, because in that envelope, her freedom could be written. And deep down, someone in that house already suspected it. Alice woke up before the Sunday. She hadn't slept a wink all night. The envelope that Beatrice had given her now lay inside her bra against her chest, as if it were a secret too alive to be left alone. She had thought about opening it right there in the middle of the night, under the yellow light of her lamp. But something in her heart told her to wait, not out of fear, but out of respect, because Walter was not just any man, and that envelope was not just any envelope. She fixed her hair in front of the mirror, smoothing her gray hairs with her own hands. She put on the navy blue dress, the one she had worn to the last church service she attended with Walter. She dabbed on the little perfume that was left in the bottle saved for years and went down the stairs with dignity, as if descending to an altar. The house was quiet. Veronica and Cole were still asleep. Raymond hadn't arrived. She walked to the kitchen, took some old coffee from the pantry, and put it to boil on the gas stove. She poured only 1 cup. She sat at her usual table in front of the window and finally took out the envelope. She looked at it for a long time. Walter's handwriting was clear, firm, almost severe. For Alice, only you. She carefully inserted her fingers along the edge and opened it. There was a folded sheet, yellowed with time, with the letterhead of a notary public from Philadelphia and the signature of Mr. Leonard Gallagher. At first, the words didn't make sense to her, but as she read, her breathing slowed, her stomach tightened, and her throat closed up. Walter had left a will, and not just any will. In that document, dated just a few months before his death, he declared that the entire house, the land, the assets, the improvements, everything built from 1972 to the present, remained in the exclusive and total name of his wife, Alice Gutierrez, as long as she lived. And the most shocking part was at the end. "And upon the passing of my wife, this estate will be irrevocably transferred to the person she designates as beneficiary, provided that this person has demonstrated dignity, respect, and true care during the final years of her life. If none of our children meet this condition, it will be transferred to whoever has, even if they are not related by blood." It was more than just a will. It was a test of character, and Walter knew his children would fail it. With this single piece of paper, the power dynamic in the entire house had just shifted. Now, Alice wasn't just a victim. She was armed with the truth, and a confrontation was inevitable. Alice felt her heart leap into her throat. That last sentence wasn't there by chance. Walter had written that with full knowledge. He already knew. Perhaps he knew before she did. She folded the paper again, put it back in her bra, got up from the table, and went straight to Beatrice's house. She knocked 3 times. Beatrice was already awake. "Did you open it?" she asked, knowing the answer without Alice saying a word. "Yes," she replied. And now I understand many things. They both sat in the small living room, the one that always smelled of rosemary and freshly baked bread. Alice told her everything calmly, without omitting a single word. When she finished, Beatrice looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. So, are you going to tell them? Not yet. And what are you going to do? Wait for them to make the next move. And when they do, that's when I'll drop the truth on them. At that moment, the landline in Beatrice's living room rang. She looked at it, surprised. I rarely get calls on this line. She answered cautiously. Hello? A serious male voice spoke on the other end. Hello, I'm trying to reach Mrs. Alice Gutierrez? This is Mr. Gibson, the notary her children contacted. I was calling her main house line, but there was no answer, so they suggested I try this number as she might be visiting. He continued, I'm calling to review some deeds, and we were planning to stop by this afternoon. They assured me you would be available to sign without any issue. I just wanted to confirm. Beatrice looked up and locked eyes with Alice, who understood immediately. Yes, Beatrice replied, lowering her voice. She'll be here. We'll be waiting for you. She hung up. They're coming today, she said. Not tomorrow. Today. Perfect, Alice replied. Then this afternoon they're going to find out who I am and who their father was. She stood up, walked back to her house with her head held high, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. Because that document wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof that there was still justice in a world that was collapsing around her. And what Alice didn't know was that someone had already smelled fear, because that very morning Veronica would enter her room without warning and find the drawer empty. It was 8 inches the morning when Veronica pushed open the door to Alice's room with her shoulder. She didn't knock, didn't announce herself. She entered with that sense of ownership that had been forming since she moved back into the house, as if being born there gave her the right to everything, even her mother's privacy. Mom, are you awake? She asked in a fake tone, as if speaking to a foolish child. Alice wasn't there. The bed was made, the room tidy, not a trace of her. Veronica frowned, walked over to the wardrobe, opened drawers, and hastily searched the bottom drawer, the one where she had once found some old notebooks. Now it was empty. She looked under the bed. Nothing. She went downstairs in a fury. Cole, have you seen Mom? She yelled from the kitchen. No, why? She's not here. And she didn't leave a note or anything. What are you worried about? She probably went to Beatrice's. She's always clinging to that old woman. Veronica didn't answer. She leaned her hands on the kitchen counter, closed her eyes for a second. She was agitated, though she didn't want to admit it. She bit her thumbnail as her mind flashed back over a decade. Soon after separating from her children's father, she had returned home, broke and defeated. Walter, still alive then, had welcomed her back without question. One afternoon, she recalled seeing her father hide a small box behind the wardrobe with a grave expression. She never forgot it. Years later, after Walter's death and fueled by suspicion, she had managed to get to the box, only to find it empty. The memory of that void now fueled her anxiety. She was certain her father had hidden something of value, and the thought that her mother had found it first weighed on her like a stone. At Beatrice's house, the atmosphere was different. Alice was sitting at the table with a cup of chamomile tea in her hands. In front of her, an open Bible. Inside, a folded photograph that she herself had saved years ago. On the back, in Walter's shaky but firm handwriting, it was written, "When you read this, remember what I hid for you. The correct name is in there. Don't trust anyone who hasn't taken care of you." Alice had already read it 3 times. She still didn't fully understand what he meant. The correct name of what? Of whom? Are you sure you don't want to read the document again? Beatrice asked from the stove. I've already read it, my friend. I know what it says. But there's something more. He left something between the lines. He didn't just leave me the house. He left me a decision. Which is? The document says that when I die, the property passes to the person I designate, as long as they have shown dignity and respect. Beatrice looked at her, bewildered, and Walter knew the children would fail. He wrote it with full intention, but he also knew that someone would take care of me, someone who is not of my blood, but is part of my life. Beatrice didn't know what to say. She lowered her gaze. Something moved forcefully in her chest. She didn't say a word, but her eyes held back tears. Hours later, the doorbell rang. "That must be them," Beatrice said, looking out the window. "They're here." Alice stood up slowly. She walked to the door calmly but firmly. She opened it. There stood Raymond, Veronica, and a man in a suit with a clipboard in his hand. "Mr. Gibson." "Mrs. Alice, a pleasure. I'm the notary your daughter hired to formalize some procedures. May we come in?" "No," she replied bluntly. "We're not signing anything here today. If you want to talk about papers, it will be somewhere else and with another lawyer." Veronica stepped closer, gritting her teeth. "Mom, what are you saying? Are you okay?" "Better than ever." Alice pulled the original document that Walter had drafted from her purse. She held it with both hands, like someone raising a banner. "Here is the only paper that matters." Raymond tried to take it from her. Alice pulled it back immediately. "Don't you dare," she shouted. "This house is not in your name, nor yours, Veronica, nor Cole's. It's in my name. And afterward, it will belong to the one who has truly been by my side, not to those who lock me up, insult me, or feed me leftovers." Silence fell like a stone. The notary, uncomfortable, adjusted his glasses. "With all due respect, if there is a prior document, this changes everything." "That's right," said Alice. "And it doesn't just change everything. This is just the beginning." Raymond clenched his fists. Veronica turned pale. Cole, on the other hand, said nothing, just lowered his gaze. And there, in that hallway, Alice knew that her fight was no longer secret. It was out in the open. The battle lines had been drawn right there on the front porch. For years she had been silent, but today Alice found her voice again. Her children were shocked, but this was only the first move in a fight that was about to get much more dangerous. It was real. And the house was not the only thing she was going to defend. The slam of the door echoed throughout the house. Raymond stormed out in a fury and crossed the patio without looking at anyone. Veronica followed him, annoyed but more worried than angry. The notary, uncomfortable, said goodbye with a half-hearted handshake and drove away in his car without looking back. Alice remained there at the entrance, firm. The document was still in her hand, folded but intact. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear, but from a strength. The same strength that hadn't emerged in years, the one that had been buried since Walter died. Beatrice, who had witnessed everything from the entryway, offered her arm. Alice gently refused it. "Today, I don't need anyone to hold me up, my friend. Today, I can stand on my own." They both shared a smile, the kind that is born when the soul can finally breathe. But the tranquility was short-lived. Cole came in after the others with slow steps. He said nothing, just walked past Alice with his head down, as if he didn't know whether to feel ashamed or relieved. And that doubt was harder than any word. The house fell into a strange silence. The children didn't say a word all afternoon. No direct complaint, no shout, but the atmosphere became thick. Every step Alice took down the hall was watched by eyes that no longer hid their discomfort. That night, no one offered her dinner. No one asked if she was hungry. She, without asking for anything, ate what was left of the rice that Beatrice had sent over days before. She heated it patiently in an old pot, sat alone in the kitchen, and chewed in silence. There was no bitterness in her expression, only a bitter peace, that of someone who no longer expects anything from anyone. The next day, Raymond didn't sleep at home. Veronica didn't show up either. But Cole did, and he was the one who broke the ice. "Are you really going to let this house stay like this?" he asked while drinking water from the dispenser. "Without sharing anything?" Alice looked up from the patio where she was watering the plants. "Like what?" "Well, just for you. You don't even need this much anymore. We have families." She put the hose aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked to the door. "You have a family, Cole, but I had one too. I changed your diapers, I cured your fevers, I made you food with the little we had, and now you hide the bread from me, you give me leftovers, and you treat me like a nuisance. And you still talk to me about sharing?" Cole didn't answer. He went to his room without looking back. In the evening, Veronica returned. She entered without a greeting, but didn't lock herself in her room as usual. She went straight up to Alice's room. She found her sitting on the bed, calmly embroidering. "Where is the will?" "I have it put away," she said without looking at her. "I want to see it." "You don't need to see it. You already know it." "Why are you doing this to me, Mom?" Alice dropped the thread, took off her glasses, and looked at her firmly. "I'm not doing anything to you, Veronica. You did this to yourself. I didn't sign off on your contempt or your indifference. I didn't draft your insults or the padlock on the kitchen. You signed off on all of that. You've always preferred Beatrice over us. Because she respects me, and because she has never made me feel less. Can you say the same?" Veronica couldn't hold her gaze. She closed the door with a light slam and ran down the stairs. Minutes later, Alice heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, then a low voice. It was Raymond. He was back. "We have to do something now. If we don't sign that sale, we lose the deal." "What if we convince her?" "With what? More contempt?" "We could, I don't know, try to make her look bad. Say she's losing her memory or that she's not in her right mind." There was a brief silence. "Are you being serious?" "If we don't do something, we're going to lose everything." The words reached Alice from behind the ajar door. "I don't need to hear any more." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat alone with Walter's document in her hands. And at the bottom of the paper, she reread the phrase that was beginning to engrave itself on her soul. "The correct name is in there. Don't trust anyone who hasn't taken care of you." Then a doubt struck her like lightning. What name had Walter really put after hers? She got out of bed in a hurry, turned on the lamp, and checked the will again. And there, at the end of the document, almost like an additional note, was a second name. One that was not any of her children's. One that, until that moment, she didn't know was written there. Alice remained seated on the edge of the bed, the document in her hands. The silence of the room was so thick she could hear the faint buzz of the light bulb hanging from the ceiling, but she paid it no mind. Her entire focus was on that name, written at the end of the will. There it was, in clear letters, and signed by the notary. In the event that Mrs. Alice Gutierrez does not explicitly designate a beneficiary before her passing, the real estate property will be transferred to Mrs. Beatrice Solis, a neighbor of the family, a person of the testator's complete trust for having demonstrated care, respect, and faithful companionship during the years following his medical diagnosis. Alice swallowed. It wasn't a surprise, but it was. Walter had left Beatrice's name legal, written, signed, sealed. For a second, she felt guilty, not for what the will said, but for what she knew was coming. The fury of her children, their humiliation upon learning that by their father's direct choice, a woman who did not share their blood would be the heir. And not out of revenge, but out of merit. Outside, the house was in shadows, but the tension was so real it could almost be touched. Veronica paced back and forth in the hallway. She went back and forth as if her body was looking for an escape that her pride wouldn't allow her to ask for. Raymond was sitting in the living room with a warm beer in his hand, his eyes fixed on the floor. Cole had left early and had not returned. "I can't believe it," Veronica said, her voice barely a whisper. "Beatrice, that woman is going to get all of this." "We don't even know if it's true," Raymond answered, though he knew it was. "So what are we going to do? Wait for them to kick us out?" Raymond jumped to his feet. "Shut up. Don't talk to me like that. We'll fix this. She's not going to get her way." "And how? Are you going to force her to sign something?" "I know other ways. What do you mean?" Raymond didn't answer, just pressed his lips together. Then he went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, saw it was empty, and slammed it shut. "There's nothing," he said. "She didn't even leave us food. She's playing with us." Veronica approached the dining room and leaned against the wall. "And isn't it possible that Beatrice is taking it to her? That she's secretly giving her groceries? And what if she is? Then she's stealing what is rightfully ours." "What is rightfully ours?" Raymond turned with fury. "The only thing that's ours is what we can get before this slips through our hands." The next morning, Alice went to see Beatrice. She crossed the side alley with the document wrapped in a handkerchief. She knocked twice. The door opened immediately. "Did you read it all?" Beatrice asked, her face more tense than usual. Yes, and there's something you need to know. She showed her the final paragraph. Beatrice read it carefully, and when she finished, she stood motionless. It can't be. Walter thought of you. He named you. You are the other heir. Beatrice shook her head as if refusing to accept the truth. I never expected that, I swear. Never. I know, my friend, Alice said, taking her hand. But it's not something you sought. It's something he saw and made clear. Beatrice was quiet. And what are you going to do? She finally asked. I don't know yet. But what I am clear about is that this house is not going to end up in the hands of those who left me without food, locked me in my room, and wanted me to disappear. And your children? My children stopped being my children a long time ago. I gave birth to them, but I no longer recognize them. That same day, Veronica went to the market. She returned with full bags, but not to share. She locked everything in the pantry. She put a new lock on the fridge, thicker than the previous one. Cole tried to get a soda and couldn't. What is this? Control, said Veronica. If Mom wants to play hardball, so do we. Alice arrived just as Veronica was locking the pantry. Now you're going to hide the food from me too? It's not hiding, Mom, it's organizing. Things aren't like they used to be. If you decide to act on your own, so will we. Alice said nothing. She walked straight to the dining room, sat in her usual place, and took a small key from her pocket. Are you looking for this? She asked, raising it slightly. Veronica froze. How? I found it tucked away in the lining of Walter's old work coat, the one he kept in the back of the closet. He always hid important things. There was a silence. Alice looked at her calmly. Do you know what this key opens, Veronica? She didn't answer. I do, and so do you. Beatrice said it a few days ago. There was a hidden compartment, and Walter had told her not to trust anyone, not even his own children. Alice stood up from the table, walked towards Walter's room, and without looking back said, Now I'm going to open what he left hidden. And if I find what I think is in there, you and your brothers are going to learn something you never expected. Veronica stood there, paralyzed, because she did know. She knew perfectly well what was inside that wardrobe, because years ago she had already found it, and what she did afterward was hide the key. Only now, that key was once again in Alice's hands. Alice climbed the stairs, the key clenched in her fist. Each step pained her knees, but she didn't stop. Her heart pounded, not just from the will's revelation, but because she knew that what she was about to do would forever close one chapter of her life and open another from which there was no return. Veronica followed a few feet behind, her steps restrained. She didn't speak, but her rage was palpable even in her breathing. It wasn't the first time they had confronted each other, but this time was different. Alice didn't walk with fear. She walked with purpose. She entered Walter's room and turned on the bedside lamp. The warm light illuminated the old pine wood wardrobe, the one that had survived 3 moves, 2 floods, and the passage of time. Alice caressed it as one would greet an old friend. She knelt in front of the piece of furniture, slid her hand along the bottom, and found the exact edge where Walter had placed the false compartment. She felt it, knocked on it with her knuckles. It sounded hollow. What are you doing? Veronica said from the doorway. What I should have done years ago. Alice inserted the key into a small slit between the planks. She turned it. The click was dry, definitive. The back of the wardrobe came loose. She carefully removed it. Inside was a box wrapped in a white cloth, meticulously folded. Alice took it out and placed it on the bed. Veronica took a step forward, but her mother raised a hand. Not you. Not yet. She unwrapped the cloth. Inside the box were several sealed envelopes, all with different dates. There was also a black notebook with the word personal, written in permanent marker, and at the bottom, a plastic bag with photographs. Alice opened the notebook first. The first pages were medical notes, doctors' names, appointment dates. Then, pages filled with Walter's reflections, written in his own hand. Today, Cole asked me for money for a truck. He doesn't need it, but he insists. Alice doesn't know. I don't want to tell her. Veronica argued with her mother again. She won't leave her alone. Sometimes I wonder if she realizes the damage she's doing. Alice doesn't know I changed the will. Not because I distrust her, but because I distrust them. If something happens to me one day, I want her to have a way to defend herself." Alice's hands trembled as she read. She turned each page with a lump in her throat. It was all there. The slow, painful process in which Walter gradually realized that his own children were drifting away, not out of necessity, but out of coldness. Next, she opened the envelopes. One contained the original purchase receipt for the land, signed in the names of Walter and Alice. Another, a copy of the previous will in which the children did appear as heirs, crossed out by hand with a note written by Walter himself, annulled by personal will. "They are not worthy." Veronica moved closer. "What are you going to do with all that?" Alice didn't answer. She took out the photos. They were old, some from the construction of the house, others from the birth of the children. But there was one in particular that chilled her blood. An image of Walter in a hospital bed with a bruise on his arm, and Raymond sitting beside him with his head down. On the back of the photo, a note. "He wouldn't explain how I fell from the chair. He picked me up from the floor but left me alone an hour later." Alice swallowed. That photo was from just a few days before he died, and although the official diagnosis was an accidental fall, the doubt Walter had captured there said it all. She put the things back, closed the box, and finally looked at Veronica. Reading her late husband's private thoughts, Alice was seeing the full picture for the first time. It wasn't one single event, but a slow, creeping decay of love and respect, all documented in his own hand. And that photograph. It wasn't just a picture, it was a silent accusation, and it gave Alice the chilling resolve she needed for what was to come. "I know what I have to do now." "What are you going to do, Mom?" "I'm going to protect this house, but not just from you all, but from the shame you left me with." Veronica followed her as she went downstairs, but at the last step, Alice stopped and faced her. "You knew that box was there, didn't you?" Veronica didn't answer. "You saw it, closed it back up, and you stole the key. It was a long time ago, and you said nothing. Why? Because I was scared. Raymond said that if we didn't secure the house, we'd end up with nothing. And that's why you locked me in, left me without food? For that?" Veronica lowered her head. Her lips trembled. "We didn't know what else to do." Alice felt a deep emptiness, as if she finally understood something she had been denying for years. It wasn't about need, it was about ambition, and ambition had rotted everything. That night she went to Beatrice. She showed her the box, the letters, the notebook, the photos, everything. And Beatrice, after looking at each piece, said, "Alice, there's enough here to defend yourself with lawyers, a notary, and a judge." "I don't want to defend myself," she replied. "I want the truth to be known." "Are you going to tell it?" "No. Someone else will. And it will be to their faces, with everyone present, when they dare to do what they're already planning." Beatrice looked at her intently. "What do you think they'll do?" Alice sighed. "They're going to try to kick me out of my own house. And when they do, that's when it all ends." And that prophecy, unknowingly, was about to come true. Because that very night, in a closed-door phone call, Raymond was already negotiating with someone who had no scruples and was willing to do anything. His first step was to find a lawyer who knew the property's history. Rummaging through his father's old files, he found a name on the original deed from 30 years ago, Martin Olson. Raymond reasoned that hiring the original lawyer would give them an advantage, believing the man's loyalty could be bought. He made the call, unaware that he was about to contact the one person who valued his father's integrity more than any fee. It was Wednesday. The sun hadn't even fully risen when Alice went down to the kitchen. No one was there, not Raymond, not Cole, not Veronica. Everything was in its place, but the atmosphere was strange, as if the air was heavier than usual. She opened the pantry and, as expected, it was padlocked. The refrigerator, too. She wasn't surprised. She poured herself a glass of water from the dispenser, sat in her usual chair, and looked out at the patio through the window, as if expecting Walter to appear at any moment in his paint-stained apron with a simple smile, asking if she wanted a donut with coffee. But there were no more donuts, no coffee, no Walter, just silence. That same silence was broken around 8 o'clock when Veronica came downstairs with her cell phone to her ear, laughing falsely with that forced tone Alice knew by heart. "Yes, of course, ma'am," she was saying. "My mom has no problem confirming. Everything is already arranged." Alice slowly turned her head. "Who are you talking to?" Veronica covered the phone with her hand. "Business, Mom. Things that don't concern you. You should go out to the patio for a while, okay?" Alice didn't answer. She just stood up, took her shawl, and went out to the side walkway. She sat on a small, concrete bench that Walter had built for her when they still painted the walls together, when there was not yet any distance between mother and children. She spent more than an hour there in silence, her gaze fixed on the dry plants, until Beatrice arrived. "I brought you some rice pudding," she said, holding a container with a blue lid. "Made just right, the way Walter liked it." Alice looked at her with a faint smile. "Now I understand why he had you in mind." Beatrice sat beside her. "Have you decided yet?" "Not yet, but it won't be long." Alice told her about the letters found in the wardrobe, about the photographs, about the note describing the bruise on Walter's arm. Beatrice listened to everything without interrupting, without passing judgment, as true friends do. "And what do you plan to do with that?" she finally asked. "I'm going to keep it, for now, but if they try to take one more step, my patience will run out." At that moment, the main gate swung open. It was Raymond, accompanied by a tall man in a white shirt and dark sunglasses. He looked like a lawyer, but he wasn't carrying a briefcase. He had malice on his face. "That's the guy who came last time," Beatrice whispered. Alice stood up and walked straight into the living room. The man nodded his head in greeting, polite but curt. "Good morning, ma'am. We've come to review some documents." "It's just a matter of signing." "What documents?" "The sale, Mom," said Raymond, positioning himself behind the man like his shadow. "We've already talked about it. You won't lose anything. You'll be well taken care of." "In exchange for what?" Alice asked. "For walking out the door as if I hadn't lived here for 40 years. We're not going to argue again, Mom. Sign and everything will be resolved." Alice took a deep breath. "And if I don't sign?" "Well then," the man in the white shirt intervened, "things get complicated. Legally, the house already has interested buyers, and if there's no agreement, we might have to move the process along another path." Alice looked at him intently. "Are you threatening me?" "No, ma'am. I'm explaining the consequences." "The consequences of being the owner of my own house?" Raymond gestured with his hands. "Mom, don't exaggerate. We're not going to kick you out. We're just going to sell. You'll have your own space and we'll support you. You'll support me with cold soup, with a locked fridge, with hidden keys." Veronica joined the conversation from the kitchen. "You're making an unnecessary drama. Nobody wants to hurt you. You've been hurting me for years, but I won't allow it anymore." The man with the dark sunglasses took a folder from his backpack and placed it on the table. "We'll leave this here for you. Read it over calmly, but don't take too long. The buyer is waiting." Alice didn't open it. She didn't touch the folder. She just said, "Tell the buyer to buy something else. This house is not for sale." That night, while everyone was asleep, Alice went down to the kitchen. The fridge was still padlocked, but she no longer cared. She poured herself a glass of water and walked to the living room. There was the folder. She opened it out of curiosity, and there she saw it. Not only had they forged her signature on a draft, but they had also submitted papers as if she had agreed. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. She sat on the sofa, and as she held that folder in her hand, her expression hardened. Her inner voice no longer trembled. She knew what she had to do, and she knew exactly who to call the next day. Because it was one thing for them to despise her, but it was another thing entirely for them to believe she would never fight back. The first ray of sun on that Thursday entered through the sewing room window. Alice was already awake. She had gotten up with the first crow of the rooster, not because she had chores, but because rage had kept her from sleeping. She had the fake sale document on the dining room table, beside it the original will, Walter's letters, and the photograph with the bruise. Everything in order, everything ready. But one thing was still missing: proof. Because in this twisted world where appearances are worth more than history, it wasn't enough to remember what had happened. It had to be proven. With dates, with ink, with objects. and Alice sensed that there was still something hidden in that house that could seal her defense. It was then that she remembered the dress, an old rose-colored one that Walter had given her for her 40th birthday. She had worn it little, but she kept it fondly. It was in the wardrobe inside a cloth bag. That garment had something special. Walter himself had had a small inscription embroidered on the inside that said, "For when I miss you, or you miss me." Alice went for it with determined hands, took it out, spread it on the bed, and patiently began to check the seams, the linings, the folds. And there, inside the inner seam of the right sleeve, she felt a small, thin, hard lump. With an old pair of scissors and great care, she undid the seam. There was an envelope, folded in 3, yellowed with time, with no return address. Her heart raced. She opened it, but the envelope was empty. There was no letter, no paper, nothing. Just the air and a faint scent of men's cologne, the same one Walter used on Sundays to go to church. Alice closed her eyes. She felt her stomach churn. The void she felt wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Where was what had been inside? Had they taken it? Had Walter taken it out? Or someone else? She looked at the seam again. It hadn't been recently opened. There were signs that it had been opened before. The thread was different from the rest of the dress, lighter, tighter, and then she understood. Someone had found it before her and taken it out. Alice sat on the bed holding the empty envelope as if it were proof of betrayal, and there was one person in that house who knew how to sew. Veronica. Alice went down to the kitchen. Veronica was there, drinking coffee, flipping through a magazine. "Was it you?" she asked bluntly. Veronica didn't even feign surprise. "What are you talking about?" "The envelope, the dress. You opened it, you sewed it back up. Where is what was inside? Are you crazy? Where is it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Veronica repeated, standing up. "But if you're losing your memory, that's not my fault." Alice approached her. "If there's something you're still hiding, I suggest you return it, because what's coming is no small thing. And if that paper had something that could help you, you still have time to save yourself." Veronica glanced down for just a second, but that gesture was enough. Alice needed no more proof. Betrayal doesn't always show itself with shouts. Sometimes it hides in eyes that can't look you straight on. At dusk, Beatrice arrived with scones. "I passed by the church today and ran into Mr. Online. Eugene," she said. "He asked about you. He still lives around the corner." "Yes, and he told me something strange, that Walter, shortly before he died, went to his house to drop off an envelope. I got the impression it wasn't for him, but for him to keep." Alice froze. "An envelope?" "Yes. He says Walter asked him not to read it, only to deliver it, if you ever asked him about it." Alice said nothing, just stood up. "Let's go get it," she said, "right now." Minutes later, they were knocking on Mr. Eugene's door. The old man received them in his cotton robe, his glasses hanging from his neck, and a cane in his hand. "I knew you were coming," he said. "Come in." He led them to a chest of drawers at the back of the living room. He opened the 3rd drawer, took out a small wooden box, and opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope in perfect condition. It was handwritten. "If my children fail, this envelope will speak for me." Alice took it with trembling hands. Mr. Eugene spoke slowly. "Walter left it with me the day after Veronica came and yelled at him in the patio. That day he locked himself away for hours. The next day he came with this envelope. And you never opened it? He asked me as a favor between friends, and I keep my promises to friends until the day I die." Alice gave him a long hug. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." "You take care of yourself," he replied, "because what's happening in your house isn't just anger, it's greed." That night, Alice returned to her house and locked herself in her room. She opened the envelope, and upon reading the letter, she finally understood why Walter had hidden everything, because what was written there was not a simple warning. It was a confession, one that changed everything she thought she knew, even about her own marriage. The handwriting was unmistakable, large, precise, with that peculiar way Walter had of drawing the letter W as if it were a tilted flag. Alice held the sheet with both hands. It was the same paper as his personal notebooks, carefully torn out, without wrinkles. It was written on both sides. It was not a letter to cry over. It was a letter to understand, to open old wounds, and also to close others that Alice didn't even know were still open. She took a deep breath and began to read. Alice, if you are reading this, it's because things happened as I imagined. I don't know when or how, but something tells me that sooner or later, our children will show their true colors. Forgive me for putting it that way, but I'm no longer afraid to say what I see. I don't want this letter to hurt you. I want it to open your eyes. For a long time, I trusted that they would change, that they would grow up with gratitude, but the truth is, we were wrong. We raised them with love, but also with guilt, and guilt raises children poorly. Do you remember when Veronica stole from the safe and swore it was for an emergency? We believed her. You gave her your mother's necklace. I gave her money, and she never returned anything. And Raymond, he always wanted to be in charge, never knew how to listen. When we refused to sell the house the first time, he stopped talking to us for a month. Then he came back as if nothing had happened. But I already knew. He didn't come back out of affection, he came back for the house. And Cole, he hurts me the most, because he did have a heart, but he chose to stay silent. And whoever stays silent while others do harm also causes pain. We made a mistake, Alice. We thought blood was thicker than respect, and it's not. Respect is the true inheritance. Alice felt her throat tighten. She turned the page and continued reading. I want you to know that if I chose to leave the house in your name and then gave the option to Beatrice, it was because I saw you. Because I saw how you were fading, little by little, while they divided the remnants of your joy. She is not of our blood, but she has treated you better than all our children combined. If you ever have to face them, don't be afraid. Use this letter. Use everything I hid. I wasn't strong enough in life, but from death, I want to be your support. That's also why I made an additional copy of the will and left it with Mr. Eugene, because if my children managed to destroy the original, you would still have something to defend yourself with. The house is yours. The silence they sowed, don't cultivate it any longer. Raise your voice. Do it for yourself. Do it for me. And if you feel alone, look at the sky. I am there. I always was, even if sometimes I didn't know how to show it. Alice did not shed a single tear, but it hurt. It hurt to read words from her husband that she never heard in his lifetime, words she needed and that only now, on paper, reached her like belated caresses, like a forgiveness that hadn't been spoken, but that she had also been waiting for. She put the letter back in the envelope, folded everything carefully, hid it, inside her bra as had become her habit, and stood up. She went straight to the small altar she had in her room. She lit a candle, looked at her wedding photograph, and murmured, "Walter, now you've truly left me a sign." That same afternoon, Beatrice entered with a hurried pace and a tense face. "Alice, we need to talk." "What happened?" "Today I passed through downtown, I went to the Wawa to make a payment, and I ran into the same guy who came with Raymond the other day, the one in the white suit, the fake notary. I don't know if he's a notary, but I saw him talking to a man who works at the public registry office. I know him. His name is Barry, and I didn't get a good feeling. They were saying they had everything ready to force the lady's exit." Alice stood in silence. "Are you sure?" "I heard it with my own 2 ears. Barry told him, "If the old woman doesn't want to leave willingly, well, too bad. With the forged signature, the paperwork will swallow the rest." Alice stood up. "Then it's no longer a suspicion. It's a war. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect what's mine." Hours later, Alice went to Mr. Eugene's house for the copy of the will. He already had it ready. He also gave her a paper with a notarized letter confirming he had received the envelope directly from Walter, with the date and his own signature. Beatrice asked for time off from the hardware store where she worked part-time and accompanied her to the office of Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who had helped her resolve a family dispute years ago. "Sir," said Alice as she placed all the documents on the desk, "I need your help. I don't want revenge, I just want justice." Peterson read everything in silence for almost half an hour. When he finished, he looked at Alice with respect. You have in your hands what very few people manage to gather: truth and evidence. So, what's next? What's next is that your children don't know you are no longer alone. Alice settled into her chair. And they also don't know that I'm no longer afraid to say everything I kept silent for years. And just as she was leaving the office, Beatrice's cell phone rang. She answered on speaker. It was Cole, and for the first time his voice sounded broken. Alice has to come back. Raymond is out of his mind, and Veronica is calling an ambulance to take her to the psychiatric ward. You, she says, you've lost your mind. Alice didn't utter a single word on the entire way back. The taxi ride from the lawyer's office to her house seemed longer than usual. She looked out the window but didn't see the street. Her mind replayed the last sentence Cole had said over the phone, an echo that wouldn't fade. Veronica is calling an ambulance to take you to the psychiatric ward. Beatrice sat beside her, gritting her teeth in silence. She knew that saying anything at that moment would only fan the flames that had been building inside Alice for weeks. It wasn't a time for comfort. It was a time for preparation. The taxi stopped a few yards from the entrance. In the distance, a police car was already visible, and next to it, a city ambulance with its lights flashing, though without the siren. A nurse in a reflective vest was talking to Veronica on the sidewalk. Alice got out of the car without a word. She walked straight, as if she didn't feel the weight of her 75 years. Veronica, seeing her, feigned surprise. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here. Look, it's for your own good. We're all worried about you. You're saying nonsensical things, hiding papers, talking to yourself at night, isolating yourself. And that justifies calling an ambulance? It's just an evaluation, a checkup. The doctors will determine if you need to rest for a few days. It's nothing serious." Rest from what, Veronica? From you trying to sell my house with a forged signature? From you denying me food? Or from the fact that Walter left a will that snatches the keys to this house from your hands? The nurse approached with a tablet in her hand. "Are you Mrs. Alice Gutierrez?" "I am," she replied in a firm voice. "We are here at the family's request. We received a report of possible disorientation and symptoms of cognitive decline. We'd like to take you for an evaluation at the General Hospital. It's routine." "Routine?" Beatrice intervened. "Taking a healthy woman against her will is routine?" "We are just following protocol," the nurse replied, avoiding eye contact. "Well, I have a protocol too," said Alice, opening her purse. She took out a perfectly organized folder with the will, Walter's letter, the legal certification from lawyer Peterson, and the sworn statement from Mr. Eugene. She handed the folder to the nurse. "There you have it, all legal. This house is mine. Here are my rights, my papers, my voice. And if you take me, I swear this will be seen by a judge with cameras and a notary." "Mom, you're delusional now," Veronica muttered, her voice trembling. Alice turned to look at her. "Delusional? Let's see. Who forged my signature on those papers? Who gave documents to that notary in the white suit saying I had authorized the sale of the house? Who put a padlock on my refrigerator and gave me cold soup while you all ate in the living room?" Raymond came out of the front door at that moment. He looked like he had just woken up, barefoot and with a scowl on his face. "What's going on here?" "Your sister called an ambulance," Beatrice told him, "to take your mother away as if she were crazy, as if she were a burden." Raymond didn't know what to say. He just stared at the folder the nurse was now flipping through with interest. There were official seals, signatures, dates, witness names, notarial references. This looks authentic," the nurse said. "And if it is, you as her children cannot make decisions without the legal authorization of the lady." "And what does that mean?" Veronica asked, now pale. "It means that if she refuses to go with us, we cannot force her. And if you insist, we might have to report an attempted unlawful confinement." "That's an exaggeration," Raymond shouted. "We just want to help her." "Then help me by going to get your things," Alice replied, "because you're not sleeping here tonight." A silence so tense fell that the entire street seemed to freeze. The wind stopped blowing. Even the neighbor's dog fell silent. The nurse carefully closed the folder and handed it back to Alice. "We're leaving. Good night." The ambulance drove away with its lights off. Veronica, trembling with rage, went into the house without a word. They tried to paint her as crazy, but Alice showed them she was strategic, prepared, and in complete control. She had won this battle, but in doing so, she had pushed her children into a corner. And a cornered Raymond was about to do something desperate. Raymond stood on the sidewalk, not knowing where to look. Beatrice hugged Alice tightly. "You defended yourself like no one else." "My hands didn't tremble today," she said, "and my voice won't tremble tomorrow either." That same night, Alice slept with her door closed, but not locked. She was no longer afraid. What she didn't know was that the next morning, Raymond would make a secret visit to the public property registry, and there he would discover something that would leave him breathless. Because Walter had also anticipated his next move. It was just after 9 inches the morning when Raymond arrived at the Public Property Registry Center in Philadelphia. He wasn't wearing a suit or a formal shirt as he used to in his office days. That morning, he wore a gray sweatshirt with the hood pulled low, trying to go unnoticed, but his intentions were not small. He took a number at the internal inquiries window. He didn't want to leave a trail. He said he was there as a citizen to check the status of a family property, the house where he had grown up, the one that, according to him, already belonged to him de facto, even though his name wasn't on any paper. And that's why he was there. He wanted to know exactly how far his mother's rights extended and how far he could force his own. While waiting for his turn, he nervously checked his phone. There was no news from Veronica since the previous day. After the failed attempt with the ambulance, she had locked herself in the guest room, her face swollen with anger. Cole was still missing, and Beatrice, the meddling neighbor who had always bothered him, was now stronger than she seemed. "Number 243, a voice called from the window. "Yes," Raymond approached. "Good morning. I'm here to check the legal status of a property. It's my mother's house, but I have doubts about the documents she recently presented. Are you the owner?" "I'm the son. I've lived there almost my whole life. I'm representing the family." The woman behind the counter didn't look up. She typed in some data. Full name of the owner, Alice Gutierrez. Exact address. Raymond gave it to her, letter by letter. She continued typing unhurriedly. 3 minutes passed in silence. He grew impatient, tapping his foot, looking around. "Here it is," the official said without emotion. "And what does it say?" "Mrs. Alice is the sole registered owner with a valid deed since 2001. Notarized and sealed deed before a public official. There are no co-owners, no prior or subsequent transfers. Any recent updates?" "Yes," the woman replied with a slight pause. "There was a preventive notation placed on the record 5 years ago at the request of Mr. Walter Mendoza, now deceased. It's a legal measure used when the owner anticipates possible future disputes. Very common in inheritance cases." Raymond frowned. "And what does that notation say? That the property cannot be modified or sold under any circumstances without the written approval of the current owner, and that in the event of the lady's death, the property will pass to the secondary beneficiary registered in Testamentary Annex No. 2, a document that is also sealed and filed here." Raymond swallowed hard. "And who is that beneficiary?" The woman finally looked up. "I cannot disclose that if you are not the authorized person." "I'm the son." "You are not listed as a beneficiary." "What do you mean, no?" "Who is listed then?" The woman didn't answer. "Is it Beatrice Solis?" The official looked back down at the monitor. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Raymond took a step back. "Can I request a copy of that file?" "Not without a court order or without being the owner or the registered beneficiary. This is an abuse. It's my family. It's my house." "No, sir," she said firmly. "It's your mother's house." Raymond left in a fury. There was no wind, but his hands felt cold. He was sweating, breathing heavily. People looked at him as he walked down the sidewalk, but he saw no one. He walked like a madman through the streets of downtown Philadelphia without direction. He stopped in an alley and called Veronica. "What do you want?" she said, her voice still flat. "We've gotten ourselves into a bigger problem than I thought." "What happened?" "I went to the registry. Walter had the property legally sealed. He put a legal lock on it 5 years ago. Beatrice is named as the beneficiary if Mom dies, and the house can't be touched as long as she's alive. And now? Now we have to speed everything up. Speed up what? Getting her to sign, or whatever needs to happen. But that house is not going to belong to some meddling old woman, not to Mom, not to anyone else. That same afternoon, Raymond returned to the house. He entered without a greeting. Alice was in the kitchen, heating up some rice that Beatrice had brought her. The fridge no longer had a padlock. He glanced at her. "You went to the registry, didn't you?" She didn't answer, just stirred the rice with a wooden spoon. "I know everything now," he said. "Then there's nothing left to explain. Are you happy? Dividing the family? Throwing everything away? You all divided the family. I'm just picking up the pieces." Raymond clenched his fists. "You're playing with fire. No, son, you all set the house on fire. I'm just protecting the walls so the foundations don't burn." That night, Alice slept lightly. She knew the storm was coming, but she also knew she now had a shield. She had proof. She had memory. And she had Beatrice. But at dawn the next day, a noise in the backyard woke her. She went out with her shawl over her shoulder, and there, in the back garden, she found the box with Walter's photos thrown on the ground, wet, open, and several letters were missing. The morning cold hit her bones directly, but Alice didn't care. She walked barefoot on the concrete floor of the backyard, her robe askew and her hair loose, until she reached the box. The wooden box that for years had held her husband's most personal memories. Now it was soaked, open, with half its contents scattered in the mud and gravel. Walter's letters, photos from when he worked at the foundry, the ticket stubs from the first movie they saw together at the Ritz Cinema, wet, torn, trampled. Alice bent down with difficulty. Her hands trembled, but not from age. It was rage, a deaf, contained rage, the same that had been growing inside her since she noticed the forged signature, since they locked the refrigerator with a padlock, since they wanted to send her to the psychiatric hospital. She picked up one of the destroyed letters. It was the shortest one that Walter had written to her after their first wedding anniversary. It was no longer legible. The drops of water and dirt had washed away the words. Only 2 clear lines remained. "I didn't know how to love until I saw you washing dishes and singing." Alice pressed it against her chest, as if she could still save something. "Who did this?" she muttered between her teeth, rising slowly. "Who dared?" Beatrice arrived shortly after, alerted by Cole, who had seen her from the back window inside the house. "Alice," Beatrice whispered, seeing her with soaked shoes and muddy hands. "What happened?" Alice said nothing, just pointed to the box. "Was this here last night?" Beatrice asked. "Yes, locked, under key." "And the key?" "I have it in my bra. No one took it from me." Beatrice understood immediately. They didn't force the box. They moved the whole thing. Someone with access took it out while everyone was asleep or while Alice wasn't paying attention. And it wasn't just anyone. At noon, Alice gathered her strength and went up to Walter's room again. Since her husband's death, that room had been more of a sanctuary than a bedroom. But now, it felt different. Something was wrong. She approached the wardrobe, the same one where she had discovered the false compartment weeks ago, and stopped. She touched it with her fingertips. The wood was not the same. The old pine that Walter had bought at the flea market had a unique texture, rough, with twisted grains and a poorly sanded edge on the right side. But this wardrobe didn't have that detail. The corner was smooth, too smooth. She bent down with difficulty. She knocked on the base 3 times. Before, it sounded hollow, now it didn't. The piece of furniture had been replaced. She knew it immediately. And then she remembered something. 3 weeks ago, Veronica had said that a friend of hers had done her a favor by taking away an old piece of furniture and bringing another. According to her, the previous one was infested with termites. Alice didn't question anything at the time. She was sick. She had a fever. She could barely move. But now everything made sense. The missing letters, the sealed compartment, the flat back, the disappearance of the black notebook. "You knew!" she suddenly shouted, not caring who heard her. Veronica ran up the stairs. "What's wrong now? You changed it. You changed the wardrobe. You took what was inside. You're talking nonsense again, Mom. Don't talk to me like that. I'm not crazy. You had it taken out. You found your father's letters. You got them wet. You destroyed them. What are you talking about?" Some old letters, worthless papers. Worthless? They were his emotional will. They were the only sincere words he left me when he already knew he was going to die. Veronica looked at her for a second. For the first time in weeks, she looked away, bit her lip, but instead of apologizing, she defended herself. I just wanted things not to get more complicated. You clung to that paper as if it were a Bible, as if it were worth more than your own children. Because you erased me, you treated me like an old rag. Now you want to clean your sins by burning the only thing I had left of him. That's enough, Mom. Stop acting like you're the only victim. And what am I then, Veronica? A burden? A stone in your path? A crazy old woman who gets in the way of family photos? Veronica didn't answer, just left. She slammed the door harder than necessary. Alice collapsed onto the bed, breathing heavily. The tears wouldn't come. Not anymore. The pain was dry, silent, deep. The kind of pain that doesn't ask for comfort, but for justice. She went downstairs, locked herself in her room, took out Walter's original envelope, the will, the statements, the photos that could still be saved. She made a decision. That very afternoon, she would go with Beatrice to the courthouse. She would request a legal protection order. She would start a formal eviction process. But when she looked out the window, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. A new black car parked right in front of her house, and inside the car, a face she knew all too well. The same face that years ago was in a photograph with Walter the day they signed the original deed to the land. The man got out of the car. He was wearing a suit, carrying a briefcase, and he wasn't there by chance. Alice didn't move. She watched the man get out of the black car with a studied slowness, as if he knew every step he took carried weight. He wore a dark suit, a perfectly knotted tie, and polished shoes. The briefcase in his right hand hung as if it contained a sentence. He was no stranger. Alice recognized him instantly. That face, that same face, appeared in one of the photographs Walter had kept in the black notebook. He was the young lawyer who, 30 years ago, had handled the original purchase of the land where the house was built. His name, though she had barely heard it in his lifetime, now sounded clear in her memory. Mr. Martin Olson. The door opened without anyone being called. Veronica, with her hair and makeup done, came out to the entryway, feigning naturalness. "Sir, it's a pleasure to see you again. Please, come in." "Thank you," the man replied without a smile. Alice descended from the second-floor hallway. Her voice cut through the air. "And what do you want to negotiate now without me?" Veronica looked at her uncomfortably. "Mom, don't make a scene. It's just a legal consultation." "Consultation?" Alice asked, descending each step with the firmness of someone no longer willing to be silent. "With the same lawyer who signed my papers with Walter 3 decades ago?" Martin looked at her and nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Alice, it's a pleasure to see you again. You don't remember me, but I remember you well. You and your husband signed the original deed with me at Notary Office 84. He was a very cautious man, and with good reason," she replied. "If only he knew how it all ended." The lawyer said nothing. Alice crossed the living room and sat in her armchair. She faced the man without fear. "Why have you come, sir?" "Ma'am, I was hired to review documentation that supposedly contradicts the will your husband left. But after reading everything they gave me, I must tell you something very clearly." A silence fell. "This case has no legal way of favoring your children." Veronica stood up. "What do you mean, no? My mother is being manipulated. That woman, Beatrice, has filled her head with ideas, has forged papers. My mother is confused." Martin turned to her calmly. "Miss Veronica, the document your mother possesses is legitimate. Your father signed it. It's notarized, registered, and also supported by witness evidence. I have seen many family disputes, but rarely do I see such legal clarity as in this case. But they built that house for us. It's ours," Raymond shouted from the kitchen. Martin raised his voice just a tone. "I'm sorry, sir. Legally, it belongs to your mother. And if she decides to change the locks, kick you out, or leave the house to whomever she wishes, she is fully within her rights." Alice looked at him with narrowed eyes. "So you're on my side?" "I am on the side of the law, ma'am, and the law is on your side." Veronica went straight to the hallway. A door was heard slamming seconds later. Raymond stood there with his arms crossed, his eyes filled with a rage he no longer knew how to contain. Alice stood up, walked to a shelf, and took out a picture frame with a photo of Walter, young, with his arms crossed in front of the house when it was just a framework. She showed it to Martin. "Do you know what hurts the most? That he saw it coming, that he anticipated it, that he wrote with his own hand everything that is happening today. But I couldn't read it while he was alive." Martin lowered his gaze. "Your husband left me a letter before he died. He asked me to only deliver it if one day this house became a source of dispute." Alice paused. "A letter?" "Yes, I brought it with me." He took the envelope from his briefcase. "I know I should have given it to you sooner, but I hoped I would never have to." He handed her the envelope. She took it with hands that now did tremble. She opened it. Even the man they hired to fight her had to admit the truth. This letter wasn't just legal support. It was Walter's voice from beyond the grave, giving her the strength she needed for the final battle. Stick with us to see how Alice uses this newfound power. It was a short letter, written in a firm hand. "If this paper is in Martin's hands, it's because what I feared most has come to pass. Alice, don't cry for them anymore. Don't seek their forgiveness if they never asked for yours. Don't beg for affection where there is no longer love. This house is yours, as was my respect for you. Do with it what you wish, but never let them take away what you built with your own hands. Your husband, Walter." Alice closed the envelope. She said nothing. It wasn't necessary. That same night, Beatrice went to see her. Alice told her everything: the visit, the letter, the lawyer's support. Beatrice hugged her, cried for her. But then a noise interrupted the moment. A sharp, loud, metallic thud came from the main gate. Alice and Beatrice ran to the door, and there, under the sidewalk lamppost, something was thrown. A black garbage bag, torn open, and inside, the wet envelope, Walter's photos, and a torn notebook. Everything that had been stolen from her was now returned like this, as if it were trash. And next to the bag, a note written in red marker. "You won with papers, but we haven't lost yet." Beatrice bent down. First, she took the black bag with both hands while Alice held the note. The paper was thick, like cheap cardstock, and had the sour smell of a freshly used red marker. The ink had bled through to the back. The message was clear, short, cowardly, but effective. "You won with papers, but we haven't lost yet." Alice read the sentence 3 times. It needed no signature, no explanation. She knew exactly where it came from. That was Raymond's handwriting. He had written that, no doubt. Maybe not with his hand, but with the twisted heart he had left. And Veronica surely celebrated it in silence from her room. "This has gotten out of control," Beatrice murmured, looking sadly at the wet photos, the torn corners, the notebook with its pages ripped out. "Alice, you can't let this go. They're not just insulting you, they're pushing you. They want you to explode. Yes, that's what they want. For me to react, to lose my calm, to scream, to have them record a video and say, 'Look at the old lady, she's lost her mind.' But I'm not going to give it to them." "Then what are you going to do?" Alice didn't answer. She went into the house without a single word, took the bag up to Walter's room, and left it on the desk. Then she took out the letter that Mr. Olson had given her, placed it on the nightstand, and lit a candle. She sat in the chair her husband used to occupy, and for a moment imagined his voice. "This isn't for revenge, Alice. It's for you. So they don't keep silencing you, so you don't end your days begging for respect in your own home." That night, Raymond didn't return. Veronica came down only once, opened the pantry, took a can of tuna, and locked herself away again. Cole appeared for a few minutes, asked Alice for an aspirin, and went back to his room. The atmosphere inside the house became a minefield. No one trusted anyone. The hallways tasted of tension, the doors of distrust. At dawn, Alice rose with the first rays of the sun, put water to heat in the enamel pot, prepared coffee with brown sugar, sliced hard bread, and went out to the patio. She placed everything on the stone table that Walter had built next to the lemon tree. Beatrice arrived on time. She held a plastic folder in her hand. "Ready? Ready?" Alice said without hesitation. Mr. Peterson has already filed the eviction request, but he said it would be ideal for you to make it public before they accuse you of something else. Public? Yes. That you yourself inform your children, with witnesses, with a lawyer present. Don't let them find out from a paper taped to the door. Let them find out face to face. And if they attack me, I'll be there, and so will the lawyer. And if they say I want to leave them on the street, you're not leaving them. They left on their own. Alice took a deep breath. Then let it be done. That same afternoon, after lunch, Mr. Peterson arrived at the house, accompanied by an assistant. He carried a briefcase with the documents already signed by the court. The eviction was in process and was a matter of days. But first, he said, I want you, ma'am, to read this to them out loud. Let it be clear that your decision is not from one day but from years of neglect, abuse, and contempt. Alice took the paper. It was a brief text, written from the heart but with legal advice, a letter of dignity, not of hatred. Veronica and Raymond were called to the living room. Cole came down on his own. He sat in a corner without speaking. Beatrice was there in silence, but recording on her cell phone with Alice's permission. Alice stood up. Her voice was firm, her back straight. I, Alice Gutierrez, she began, her voice steady and clear, resonating with a strength they hadn't heard in decades. I am standing in the house I built. I am speaking as the woman who raised you. For years I have been silent, but my silence was not consent. She held up Walter's handwritten letter. Your father left me a will to protect this house, but he also left me this, to protect my heart. This isn't about law or property anymore. This is about truth. And the truth is, you broke your mother's heart long before you tried to steal her home. Veronica crossed her arms. Raymond shot a look at the lawyer. This is a trap, he said. No, this is a consequence. Alice corrected and continued reading. For years, I tolerated contempt, ridicule, insults, hunger, padlocks, confinement, lies, forgeries, shouts, fists on the table, slammed doors, all in silence. But today, with these documents, with the law on my side, and with a clear conscience, I tell you it's over. You have no right to do this, Veronica shouted, standing up. Walter would never do this. Walter wrote every word that took away your right to call yourselves heirs, and you know it. Beatrice manipulated you, she insisted. You're not thinking clearly anymore. Alice took a step closer. I am thinking so clearly that I finally realized what you wanted from me wasn't love. It was the will. No one answered. You have 1 week to leave. If you don't, the judge will order it. But if you leave before then, without fighting anymore, I will not expose you. I will not humiliate you. I will not show the videos, nor the papers, nor the letters. I will keep my dignity for myself, and I leave you one last chance to save yours. She turned, went up the stairs, and before closing her bedroom door, she looked back just once. You didn't fail me because you were poor. You failed me because you were vile. Those words, spoken with the weight of years of pain, landed with the force of a final judgment. She wasn't just taking back her house. She was taking back her dignity. But as Alice closed her door, she had no idea what her children, now truly desperate, were planning in the shadows. That night, the house did not sleep. Veronica packed her bags in secret. Raymond made 2 calls, one to a private number, another to someone who answered with a trembling voice. And Cole sat alone on the patio with his head in his hands, because although everyone knew the end was near, none of them imagined what would happen before it arrived. Cole didn't sleep that night, not because of noise or guilt. He didn't sleep because, for the first time, he understood that the silence he had chosen for years no longer protected him. It condemned him. He stayed on the patio until the sun came up, his gaze fixed on the loose tiles, his feet cold. At times, he would close his eyes and see his mother's face from the day before, reading them that letter, as if she were reading them their expulsion notice from heaven. He hadn't shouted, hadn't fought, hadn't insulted, but he hadn't defended her either. And that was his true mistake. Inside the house, Veronica had spent the early morning packing what little she had left. Shoes, creams, documents that would be of no use to her. She did it with harsh movements, like someone packing not things, but rage. Raymond was gone. He had left in the middle of the night without saying where. He called a private number from the street and didn't come back. Alice, from her room, heard him leave. She didn't stop him. Beatrice arrived early, as she did every morning. "You look better this morning," she said to Alice, pouring her a cup of mint tea. "I slept like I haven't slept in years, without fear of someone knocking on my door with threats or rummaging through my drawers while I'm at church. Do you think they'll leave peacefully? I don't know, but if they don't, I'm prepared for whatever comes." Beatrice placed an envelope on the table. "Here is the complaint the lawyer drafted for the destruction of your personal documents. If you decide to sign it, it will be submitted tomorrow. But it's your decision." Alice looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. "I want to wait one more day, to see if they have any shame left." At 11 inches the morning, Veronica came down with 2 suitcases. Her makeup was intact, as if she were going to a party, but her eyes didn't lie. Cole approached her. "Where are you going? What's it to you? And Raymond? Are you just going to stay here like nothing happened?" "It's not nothing, Veronica. It's our mother." "No, our mother left years ago. The one left here is a resentful lady with a meddling neighbor who brainwashed her." Cole didn't answer. "Do whatever you want," she said, leaving without a backward glance. Beatrice watched from the window. "One down," she murmured. But Alice didn't celebrate. She just sighed. At 3 inches the afternoon, the gate sounded again. This time violently, 3 hard, dry knocks from a closed fist. Alice stood up, opened it without fear. It was Raymond. He wore a wrinkled shirt, no tie, and his eyes were blazing. "I want to talk to you," he said. "Come in," Alice replied. He entered without a greeting, without looking at Beatrice. He went straight to the dining room. Alice sat across from him. "Tell me. I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness, because I don't care if you forgive me. Then don't waste your time. I just came to tell you that we're not leaving. Not today, not tomorrow, not next week. And if the judge comes, I'll tell him the same thing. That we built this house together, that we've lived here since we were kids, that you're not in your right mind, that you're being manipulated. And what do you expect to happen? For you to listen to me one last time, because if you want a war, you'll get one. No, I don't want a war, Raymond, but I won't let myself be crushed either. Then, get ready." He stood up, and before leaving, left a key on the table. Alice recognized it immediately. It was the key to the original wardrobe, the one she had lost years ago, the one someone had silently taken from her. The same one that opened the false bottom, where Walter hid what pained him most. "What is this? I left it there so you know that I keep things too, and I'm not afraid to use them if necessary." He left. Alice was left with the key in her hand. She squeezed it, said nothing. But that night, when she went to bed, she placed the key under her pillow and knew that Raymond wasn't just talking about secrets, he was talking about something more. And what Alice didn't know was that same night, Raymond would sneak into Mr. Eugene's house, because there was still a copy of the will there, and he was willing to destroy everything to avoid losing. The dawn crept over Pennsylvania like a cold sigh. The neighborhood was quiet, asleep, as if the city had paused for a few hours. But in Mr. Eugene's house, a different kind of silence lingered, one without peace, but with menace. At 3:16 inches the morning, someone forced the lock on the back gate. There was no need to break it. He had a copy. He had lived in that house years ago, as a child, when Mr. Eugene would lend him the hose to wash his bike. He knew every corner. Raymond entered with a flashlight in hand and leather gloves. The yellow light barely illuminated the worn walls of the hallway. He walked slowly, without making a sound, until he reached the door of Mr. Eugene's workshop. He knew the old man slept deeply, on medication, since he had injured his leg. Walter had told him in his final days. "Mr. Eugene sleeps like a log when he takes his drops," he'd said, and Raymond remembered everything. He forced the lock on the large cabinet where, according to what Alice had said out loud days before, a copy of the will was kept. He searched, rummaged, opened boxes, kicked cans, tore envelopes, and there, In an old, folded folder with faded letters, he found what he feared most but also what he needed: a legalized copy of the original will, a sheet with seals, signatures, and a statement signed by Mr. Eugene himself, confirming that Walter had personally delivered the document for safekeeping. Raymond stared at that paper as if it were dynamite. He read it from top to bottom, and what he saw finally broke him. There, in large, clearly legible letters, it was specified that the property would, after Alice's death, belong to a person who had demonstrated constant companionship and care. And next to that paragraph, an underlined name, Beatrice Solis. His blood ran cold. He knew Alice had already said it. He knew it was likely, but to read it, to see it in writing, was another thing entirely. He didn't think twice. He went to the stove on the patio, took a lighter from his pocket, and lit the flame. He stuck the papers between the rusty grates and let the fire turn them to ash, one by one. When he was done, he swept up the ashes and threw them down the drain. And before leaving, he put everything back as it was. Not a sound, not a witness. At 7 inches the morning, Mr. Eugene woke with difficulty. His hip ached. He dragged himself with his cane to the workshop. Something wasn't right. The books were misplaced. Envelopes were missing. He opened the wooden box where he kept Walter's will empty. "No," he murmured. He searched everywhere, rummaged through drawers, but it was gone. He went out to the street as best he could. He knocked on Alice's door. Beatrice opened it. "Alice, did something happen?" Alice approached, worried. "What?" "The will. The copy. The one Walter gave me. Someone took it." "What do you mean, took it? It's not there. And I didn't open that door. No one has a key but you. And Raymond." Beatrice stepped forward. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. It was there last night. This morning it's gone." Alice said nothing, just looked towards the street and knew. Mid-morning, Raymond entered the house with a coffee in hand, as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, Mom." Alice looked at him from the dining room. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a king." "And what did you dream about?" "That everything was back to how it used to be." "Before what?" "Before you let a stranger turn you against your own children." Alice observed him for a few seconds, then stood up calmly and placed the original folder of the will in front of him, the one still in her possession, signed by the notary and sealed. "Are you sure everything is still the same?" "More than ever," he replied without blinking. "And what would you do if I told you the law is no longer on your side?" "I'd tell the law it's better not to meddle where it's not wanted." That afternoon, Alice and Beatrice went to see Mr. Peterson. They told him about the disappearance of the document from Mr. Eugene's house. He listened to everything in silence. Then he opened a folder. "Don't worry. The copy I have in this office is valid, and the original, the real one, is already in the court's custody." Alice sighed. "Thank you." Peterson closed the folder and looked at them seriously. "But I warn you, what happened last night is serious." Raymond crossed a line. "We know," said Beatrice. "Except now he's not going to get away clean. Then we have to act, because they won't stop fighting. And I'm afraid their next move will be their last." "What do you mean?" asked Alice. The lawyer paused. "Rumors travel fast. I was informed an hour ago that someone is trying to register a falsified power of attorney in your name at another notary's office." "What?" "Yes. If they manage to present it as valid, they can make it seem like you authorized the sale of the house." Alice put a hand to her chest. "Another forgery." "Yes, and this time they're going all in." Alice took a deep breath, closed her eyes. "Then there's no other choice." "What?" "We're going to confront them once and for all. But this time, in front of the judge. Because dignity is not begged for, it's defended." And she was ready, though her children didn't yet know that they were no longer writing this story. The court date was set for Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning, room 4 of the family court in Philadelphia. Beatrice arrived early. She was dressed soberly but firmly, a neatly ironed white blouse and a dark blue skirt she only wore for important occasions. In her purse, she carried copies of everything. The will, Mr. Eugene's statements, proof of the attempted forced eviction, photos of the vandalized gate, the threatening note, everything. Alice, on the other hand, didn't arrive in elegant clothes. She arrived with her dignity. She wore the same navy blue dress Walter had bought her for their first grandson's baptism, the same one she later stored at the back of the wardrobe where he hid his papers. She braided her hair and wore her black patent leather shoes, the ones she wore to church on Sundays not to impress, but to honor her story. Mr. Peterson was already waiting for them in the hallway. His expression was as serious as ever, but that morning there was something different in his eyes. Perhaps because he knew they weren't just facing a case, but closing a story marked by abandonment, manipulation, and silent pain. Across the hall, Raymond arrived 10 minutes late. He carried his jacket slung over his shoulder, his shirt unironed, and his eyes glassy from feigning composure. Behind him, Veronica wore dark sunglasses, her hair down, and clutched a notebook she hadn't let go of since she got out of the taxi. She avoided looking at her mother. Cole did not arrive. The courtroom was smaller than Alice had imagined. A cold space with wooden benches and a platform where the judge, a young woman with a firm face, was already quickly skimming the file. Case number 497, Petition for Property Protection and Validation of Original Will by Mrs. Alice Gutierrez, the judge said without looking up. Present, Alice said in a clear voice. Responding party, the judge continued. Raymond Mendoza Gutierrez and Veronica Mendoza Gutierrez. Present, they both said almost in unison. Is any family member missing? Cole couldn't make it, said Raymond. He will be considered absent, the judge replied. Let's begin. The first 2 hours were technical. Mr. Peterson presented documents, a timeline of events, evidence of manipulation, and above all, Walter's original will with the certified signatures, dates, and notarial backing from Mr. Olson. Raymond tried to interrupt several times. He said his mother had changed since becoming friends with Beatrice. He said she suffered from memory lapses, that she couldn't remember basic things. Veronica testified that her mother was no longer the same, that someone was manipulating her, that she was confused, that everything happening was a family misunderstanding. But then Mr. Peterson requested permission to play a video. The judge nodded, and on the courtroom screen, the recording of the day Alice read the letter to her children was projected for all to see. The camera was fixed on her face, on her voice, on her contained trembling, on her firm gaze. She was heard without a single hesitation. Veronica squeezed the notebook in her hands. Raymond lowered his head. When the video ended, the judge remained silent. She flipped through the pages once more, then addressed Alice. Mrs. Alice, do you have anything to say? Alice stood up slowly, walked to the microphone. I'm not going to say much because I've already said it all at my house. I just want you to hear me as a mother, as a woman, and as a human being. She took a deep breath. They didn't hit me with their hands. They hit me with their silence, with their contempt, with hunger, with indifference. And when I tried to speak, they wanted to lock me up. When I presented my papers, they called me crazy. When I defended what was mine, they threw my husband's pictures in the trash. Her voice broke. I don't wish them ill, but I don't want them near me either. And if that makes me a bad mother, then I'd rather be that than continue to be a victim. In that moment, standing before the court, Alice wasn't just a plaintiff. She was a survivor telling her truth. She had laid her heart bare, and now everything rested in the hands of the judge. The wait for the verdict would be agonizing. The judge remained silent. Thank you for your sincerity, Mrs. Alice. The hearing ended at 12:47 p.m. The judge retired without issuing a ruling. She would take 72 hours to deliver a verdict, but everyone in the courtroom already knew the truth. Raymond left without speaking to anyone. At the end of the hallway, Veronica turned for a moment. She looked at her mother from a distance, but Alice didn't look back, because there was nothing left to look at, only dignity to reclaim. As night fell, Beatrice made tea for Alice. They were sitting on the patio next to the lemon tree. The house was silent. What if we don't win? Beatrice asked, fear in her eyes. I've already won, said Alice, because for the first time I no longer feel alone. But elsewhere in the city, a dark office turned on its lights. A new lawyer, hired at the last minute by Raymond, was quickly looking over some documents. And you want us to annul the hearing? Yes, Raymond replied. And if that's not possible, I want everything that woman presented to be invalidated. Are you willing to do whatever it takes? Raymond didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes, even if it's the last thing I do. And in his briefcase, he already carried the papers for a sale that Alice had never authorized. Sunday dawned with a gray sky. The clouds hung heavy over Pennsylvania, as if they too knew what was about to happen. In Alice's house, everything was silent, but not at peace. A thick, heavy silence, like a storm holding its breath in the air before breaking. Beatrice arrived at 7 with scones wrapped in a cloth napkin. "Did you sleep?" she asked as she entered. "No, but it doesn't tire me like it used to." "I'm ready, Beatrice." "For what?" "For whatever. Because today I'm not closing the door." Beatrice looked at her with concern, but didn't argue. She knew that when Alice spoke like that, there was no turning back. At 9:15, Raymond appeared. He didn't knock, didn't greet. He entered as if he still had the right. He wore a backpack on his shoulder and a hard look in his eyes, the kind only someone who has crossed a line and has no intention of turning back can have. "What are you doing here?" Alice asked from the dining room. "I came to stay. You have an eviction order in process. The final ruling hasn't come out, so legally, I'm still your son, and this house is also mine. No, this house was never yours, not on paper, not in love." Raymond left his backpack at the entrance and walked straight to the back room. "You're not kicking me out, Mom. Not you, not your neighbor. No one is kicking you out here. You're throwing yourself out, step by step." At noon, Alice went to the kitchen. She started preparing rice with vegetables, whatever she had. Beatrice was helping her chop an onion when they heard the door slam. Veronica had just arrived. "So there's food now," she said mockingly, throwing her purse on the table. "What a miracle that you can afford to eat now." Alice didn't respond. She poured her a glass of water and continued with her task. Veronica wandered through the house like an annoyed visitor. She criticized the dry plants, the dust at the entrance, the cracked mirror in the bathroom. She walked with her arms crossed and that air of superiority that had followed her forever. At 12 o'clock sharp, they all sat at the table. Beatrice, Alice, Cole, who had come down in silence, and the two siblings. The table seemed narrower, the glances sharper than the knives. "So when are you planning to leave, Mom?" Raymond blurted out suddenly. "Because all this you're doing is just prolonging the inevitable." "What is the inevitable?" Alice asked, serving herself rice. "That you're not going to win. Even if you have for now, this doesn't end here. And why not? What's missing?" "Something's always missing, and you know it." Alice looked at him calmly. "I'm not afraid of losing, son. But you are afraid of someone finally telling you the truth to your face, that you deserve nothing." Veronica shot up from her seat. "That's it. Now you're going to lecture us after doing all this? After parading us around like criminals?" "I didn't parade you. I just gave you the opportunity to show yourselves for who you really are, and you didn't waste it." Cole lowered his head. He wasn't eating, just pushing the rice around with his fork. "You were never a mother, Mom. You were always a martyr, and now you love playing the victim," Veronica spat. Beatrice stood up. "You have no right to talk to her like that. Not after everything you've done to her. And you? You're a nobody here. I'm more family to her than you are." "Sure. That's why she's going to leave you the house, right?" Veronica laughed. "Well played, Beatrice. You won her over by humiliating us, separating us, feeding all this hatred." Alice stood up. "I fed myself, Veronica. You didn't even give me that. And don't come to me with feigned guilt. This isn't about the house anymore. It's about everything you destroyed without even realizing it." Raymond looked at her intently. "You're kicking us out, aren't you?" "No. You had already left. You just came back for the scraps." Silence. Only the clinking of a spoon against Cole's plate could be heard. That night, Alice locked herself in her room, her back straight. She had eaten little, but her stomach and soul were firm. She looked at the open Bible on her nightstand, the same one where Walter had hidden his first letter. And inside, she found something she didn't remember putting there. A folded piece of paper, a handwritten note in a shaky but familiar script. "Mom, I don't know how to reach you without breaking. But if you don't wake up tomorrow, I want you to know that everything I did hurts me. I don't know how to fix it. I just wanted to tell you that even though I'm late, I'm still here, Cole." Alice read it slowly, and for the first time in many days, she cried silently. But on the other side of the house, Raymond was preparing something else. His lawyer had found a corrupt judge, one willing to register Alice's forged signature as valid. And the next day, the house would legally appear in the hands of a phantom buyer, a faceless man with dirty money and clear orders, to get Alice out even if it meant using force. The day dawned with a thick heat, the kind that gives no quarter to shadow or soul. Alice woke before the rooster crowed. She had dreamed of Walter, not like other times when he appeared to her young, smiling, and hard-working. This time, she saw him serious. He spoke to her without a voice from a park bench where they used to walk. Alice would get closer, but he would only look at her with sadness, as if trying to warn her of something she didn't yet understand. When she opened her eyes, her forehead was soaked with sweat. She went to the patio, watered the dry plants she refused to throw away, and sat under the lemon tree. She was restless. Cole came down shortly after. His eyes were red, but not from lack of sleep. He had been crying. Alice knew. She had felt it since the night before, when she read the note hidden between the pages of the Bible. He hadn't said anything to her yet, but he didn't need to. "Want some coffee?" he asked. "Only if it's with sugar, not with guilt." Cole managed a forced smile. "Then I'll make it right now," he replied, looking down. At 10:40, an official notice arrived. A man from the courthouse in a beige vest and dark glasses knocked on the door and delivered a sealed envelope. He didn't say another word, just asked for a signature and left. Beatrice read it with Alice. "This doesn't make sense," she said, reading it again. "It says here that, according to the property registry system, the house's purchase agreement has already been updated." "What?" "It says here there was a signature of yours authorizing the sale of the property to a real estate company, that a transfer process is already active, that it was you who signed it 3 days ago. But I haven't signed anything." Beatrice looked at her, horrified. "It's a forgery, another one. And this one is already in the official system. Raymond did it." Alice sat down hard. "What do we do? We're going to Mr. Peterson's office. This has gotten out of control." When they arrived, the lawyer received them with urgency. He read the notification line by line, until he let out a stifled snort. They did it. They found someone inside the system, a judge, a registrar, someone corrupt who accepted the document as valid. "And that means what?" Beatrice asked. "That on paper, right now, the house is no longer listed under Alice's name. It's listed under a shell company. And if we don't stop this today, they could arrive tomorrow with an eviction order backed by that fraudulent document. Can it be stopped? Yes, but it won't be easy. We need an emergency hearing and clear proof that you, Alice, never signed that paper. I have my real signature on all my documents. The will, the letters, my old IDs, everything. It's not enough. If they presented a forged signature on physical paper, but with judicial backing, we have to prove that whoever validated it was part of the fraud. What if we show the video the day they tried to make her sign? We'll use it, and I'm going to request that the supposed buyer appear, because that company doesn't exist. It's a front, and behind it is someone with a name. In the afternoon, Alice returned home with Beatrice, but they didn't enter as before. Outside, in front of the gate, a white van was parked, tinted windows, unidentified plates. A man in a hat and a black shirt was smoking, leaning against the hood. "Do you know him?" Beatrice asked. "I've never seen him before. He's not from the neighborhood." They walked cautiously. The man didn't move, but he followed Alice with his eyes until she went inside and double-locked the door. Inside, Raymond was sitting in the living room, legs crossed, phone in hand. "Why is that guy here?" Alice asked bluntly. "What guy?" "The one outside with the thug face." "I don't know what you're talking about. Does it have to do with the fake sale?" "What fake sale?" He replied sarcastically. "Mom, you already signed, don't you remember?" Alice took a step forward, stood right in front of him. "Look into my eyes, Raymond. Do you think I'm going to let you finish what you started? Let you kick me out of here like a crazy woman after everything you've done to me? You're going to leave on your own, he said, putting his phone away. What's coming? You won't be able to stop. Beatrice approached him. What's coming? You think the law will always be on your side? He laughed. There are laws and there are deals. And what do you think will happen when all of this comes to light? Nothing, because when all of this blows up, you won't be here anymore. Alice felt a chill. Raymond went up the stairs as if he hadn't just spat venom, and then Beatrice touched Alice's arm. We have to move, now. Where to? Anywhere safe. You can't sleep here tonight. Not while he's willing to do anything. Alice pressed her lips together, looked at the house, the walls, the hanging photos, Walter's old armchair, the hallway lamp. Every corner was her life. I'm not leaving. Alice, please. I'm not leaving. If they take me out, they'll have to drag me. But I'm not leaving. Beatrice swallowed. Then we both stay. But tonight, we're going to barricade everything, and we're going to pray that justice arrives before they do. But elsewhere, in the darkness of a nameless office, a fake judge had already signed the final eviction order, and a bailiff had already been assigned to execute it. Monday, 8:30 inches the morning. Beatrice was checking for the 5th time that the door's bolt was secure. She pushed it, pulled it, and then turned the iron latch 3 times. The entryway was also secured. The back patio gate reinforced with chains, the windows boarded up from the inside. The doorbell no longer rang. Alice had disconnected it 2 nights ago. Everything was tied down, sealed, but fear didn't understand locks. In the kitchen, Alice stirred her oatmeal in silence. Her eyes were swollen, not from insomnia, but from what she already anticipated. She knew today was the day, that something would move, that something or someone was going to touch the house in a way she couldn't ignore. Eat, Beatrice said, bringing her the plate. I'm not hungry. You haven't even tried. Alice didn't answer. Her hands rested on the plastic tablecloth with its faded flowers, her nails broken, her veins exposed. It was a sad image, but also a firm one. The lawyer said we would know today if the corrupt judge managed to move anything, Beatrice insisted. We shouldn't assume the worst. Maybe they won't dare. And if they're no longer afraid, then the legal blow will hurt when it comes. And what if before the legal blow, they want to give me a physical one? Beatrice didn't know what to say. At 9:20, the first knock came. It wasn't on the door, it was on the gate. 3 times with a metal object. It wasn't a doorbell, it was a warning. Alice stood up with difficulty. Beatrice caught up with her in the living room. They didn't open. Who is it? Alice asked loudly from inside. Silence. And then a man spoke. It wasn't Raymond. It wasn't Cole. It wasn't any neighbor. I am here by court order to execute an immediate eviction of the property due to a signed transfer of ownership. Sealed document. Bailiff with legal authority. Beatrice felt her stomach drop. There is no valid order. This property is protected, she replied from inside. We are not here to debate. We have authorization to enter by force if you do not cooperate. Then show us the order, Alice shouted. Legally, you must deliver it through the mail slot before entering. A second of silence. Then an envelope was slipped under the door. Beatrice picked it up, opened it, and read it quickly. It's fake. The judge's signature is digitally altered, and the case number doesn't even match. They'll still come in, Alice whispered. Then let them come in, but you stay behind me. Then, from the street, another voice shouted, Beatrice, Alice! It was Cole's voice. They both went to the window. Cole was running down the sidewalk, agitated, with his phone in his hand. Don't open, don't let them. The lawyer has already filed a criminal complaint against the judge and the fake real estate company. The emergency stay is now active, Alice shouted to the fake bailiff from inside. You've been reported. If you cross that door, you'll end up in handcuffs. Silence returned, and then footsteps. 1, 2, 3. The white van sped off and was gone. Alice didn't move. She stood by the door, her forehead sweating, her legs trembling, but still standing. Are they gone? Beatrice asked. This time, yes. And next time? Next time, they won't knock on the door, they'll use other hands. They had failed to break her spirit, so now they were trying to break down her door. Alice and Beatrice had won this round, but the threat was no longer just about legal papers. It was now clear that Raymond would stop at nothing, and the danger was becoming intensely personal. That night, the whole neighborhood was talking. Neighbors who used to pretend not to see now watched from their windows. Others crossed the sidewalk with quick steps, and some, like old Petra from the corner store, came over just to say in a low voice, "Be careful, Alice, because when justice fails, some people use a different kind of help." And Alice understood. What was coming wasn't legal, it was personal. And personal sometimes arrives with a covered face, and other times with the very face of your own son. The next day dawned with the tense calm that can only exist when danger has already knocked on the door and you don't know if it will return. Alice carefully opened her bedroom window. Outside, the air was thick, without a breeze. Not even the neighborhood dogs were barking. It was as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. Beatrice was sleeping in the guest room. She hadn't wanted to leave that night. She insisted on staying, and Alice didn't argue. Something inside her told her she shouldn't be alone, and she was silently grateful. Breakfast was quiet, but it tasted of resistance. Fried bread, coffee with cinnamon, and refried beans, just like Walter used to make to cheer her up after a tough week. Alice ate slowly. Beatrice watched with wide eyes, as if expecting a sign of something she didn't yet understand. "They're not coming today," Alice said suddenly. "Why are you so sure?" "Because last night they already lost." Lost what? Their fear. And when someone loses their fear, all that's left is desperation. And desperation, Beatrice, doesn't think. It just acts. At 10:15, Alice was looking through an old box of memories she had kept under the bed. Inside, she found something she didn't expect, a worn-out hardcover planner. On the first page, written in blue ink, were the words, "Walter, only for what must not be forgotten." She flipped through the pages. They were filled with notes, payments, phone numbers, home remedies, but in the middle, a sheet folded several times was hidden between two pages. She unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a letter, but it wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to Raymond. "Son, I know you won't understand this today, but I want you to know something I never dared to say to your face. The land where we built the house wasn't a gift. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a loan given to us on one condition, that it would never be sold, that it would stay in the family. And you, from a young age, showed ambition not to build, but to own. I saw it when you were 14 and hid the deeds in the closet. I saw it when you cried, not because you were scolded, but because you couldn't change your name on the papers. Son, I failed you as a father by not correcting you in time. But I will not leave you the house, because I wouldn't leave anyone an inheritance they would only use to erase me." Alice felt a lump in her throat. It was the first time she had seen Walter write with such clarity, without beating around the bush, without embellishments, as if he already knew he wouldn't be there to say it with his voice. "What is that?" Beatrice asked from the doorway. Alice handed her the sheet. Beatrice read it in silence. Raymond knew this, didn't he? That's why there was so much hatred, because deep down, he always knew his father didn't trust him. "Are you going to show this to the judge?" "No, this letter isn't for the judge. Then it's for Cole." That same afternoon, Alice sat with Cole on the patio. She handed him the letter without a word. He read it with a furrowed brow, biting his lower lip. When he finished, he folded it carefully and held it in his hands. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you still have time, son, not to be like them. And because I want you to know that your father saw something different in you, too. You kept quiet a lot, but you didn't destroy." Cole pressed the sheet to his chest, his eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to help you, Mom, and I didn't know how to ask for it, son." They hugged, they cried, but it was a cry that didn't break, but rather united. But while bonds were being restored on that patio, elsewhere, Veronica was planning her final move. She was sitting in a downtown coffee shop with her cell phone in her hand. Across from her sat the same lawyer Raymond had hired days before. "So, there's no way to annul the will?" "No. With everything that has come to light, if we try, we'll only sink deeper, and if the proof disappears, It's not just one piece anymore. There are legal copies, digital backups, witnesses. Everything is documented. Veronica fell silent. So, we've lost. The lawyer looked at her. It depends on what you're willing to do. Because there's something you know that you haven't said yet. Veronica thought for a moment. What do you mean? That afternoon, when Walter fell on the patio, you said it was an accident, but I know your mother didn't entirely believe you. Veronica looked down. It was a small push, on impulse. I didn't mean to, but it happened. And if someone else finds out? Veronica interrupted him with a whisper. No one will know, because if any of this gets out, I can talk too. About what? About what Raymond forced me to sign, about the hidden accounts, and about what's going to happen this week. The lawyer fell silent. What's going to happen this week, Veronica? She smiled with her mouth, but not with her eyes. Nothing legal, but something definitive. And that same night, in an office on the outskirts of Philadelphia, a document was signed by a buyer with a false identity, and Alice's name was removed from the system one last time, at least for a few hours. Wednesday dawned as if nothing had happened. The truck sounded the same. The church bells continued to mark the hour, and the neighbors swept their sidewalks with their brooms, as they did every morning. But inside Alice's house, it was no ordinary day. It was the day Beatrice had silently waited for, the day Alice had imagined on so many sleepless nights, and the day Raymond and Veronica failed to stop because they thought they still had time. At 9:15, a gray car with the logos of the Pennsylvania Judiciary parked in front of the house. Two men got out with folders in hand, one of them with glasses hanging from his neck and an attitude that left no room for doubt. What they brought was not a notice, it was an execution. Mr. Peterson? The taller one asked as he reached the entryway. Present, the lawyer responded from the other side. We are ready. Alice was already dressed, not in finery, but in history. She wore her brown linen dress, the one she had worn to Walter's funeral, with the buttons done up firmly and a calm heart. Are you sure? Beatrice asked her one last time. Yes. They're not going to break me today. At 9:30, Raymond appeared down the street, walking as if he had just come from buying bread. He wore his shirt open to his chest and carried a plastic bag with some tangled documents. Seeing the judicial car, he stopped. His eyes changed. He quickened his pace, went inside without a greeting, and walked straight into the living room. What are you doing here? He spat. Raymond, Peterson said in a dry tone. Today, the fraudulent purchase agreement process is being completely nullified. The house is once again legally protected in the name of Mrs. Alice Gutierrez. The notary office that registered your act has been sanctioned, and the judge who approved it suspended. Raymond gritted his teeth. That can't be. I have the papers. The forged papers are already in the hands of the district attorney. You did this, he yelled at his mother. You and that meddling old woman. Don't raise your voice, Alice said without flinching. The only one who shouted throughout this whole story was you. At 10 o'clock, the official opened his folder, read the annulment decree aloud, and then held out a sheet. This is the final resolution. The sale of the property is completely nullified. The house remains under the guardianship of its legal owner, Mrs. Alice Gutierrez. And from this moment on, any unauthorized person must vacate the premises within a period not exceeding 48 hours. Veronica came down the stairs just as the official finished speaking. She carried a handbag, and her lips were pressed tight. Are you going to kick me out too? I'm not kicking you out, said Alice. You left on your own the moment you hid the food, the moment you locked the refrigerator, the moment you spoke to me as if I hadn't carried you for 9 months. You turned your back on us. No, you turned your backs on me and pushed me away. Raymond shouted again. He tried to snatch the papers but was stopped by one of the officials. If you touch the documents, it will be considered obstruction of justice, the official said firmly. Beatrice, from the doorway, recorded everything with her cell phone. Are you okay? She whispered to Alice. No, but I feel alive. Cole came in after everyone else. He arrived with his head down, but without running away. I'm sorry, he said, approaching his mother. I couldn't change what they did, but I'm not going to follow them either. Alice looked at him. It's not too late to be different. Can I still stay? Alice paused for a few seconds. Yes, but no longer as a son, but as a man. Cole lowered his head, not in shame, but in gratitude. That afternoon, the resolution was delivered to the public registry. Alice's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, did the last thing that was needed. He sealed with his own hand that from that moment on, the house was also legally shielded against any future attempt of sale, transfer, loan, or mortgage. And the next day, Alice signed a new document, one that Walter had left for her in a sealed envelope, one she could only open when everything was settled. It was a second will, shorter, more recent, where at the end Walter had written, "And when you are no longer here, let this house remain in the hands of the one who truly cared for you, not with words, but with deeds." And at the foot of that page, there was a single name, Beatrice Solis. And as Alice signed that paper from the back of the house, Raymond made his last call from Walter's old room, a call that would put him in the sights of someone that not even justice could save him from. Friday, 8 inches the morning. The street was empty. Not a bicycle, not a vendor, not even the hot dog cart passed by Alice's house that morning. The silence was so intense that even footsteps on the sidewalk seemed to echo. But inside the house, the tension had a different rhythm, a slow one, breathing in Alice's chest like a premonition. Beatrice had already made coffee. Cole was helping move some boxes in the hallway, not because Alice was leaving, but because he had decided to stay not as a tenant, nor as a lost son, but as part of the rebuilding. "Today's the meeting," Beatrice said, pouring 2 cups. "The official, the notary, the lawyer, the buyer. They'll all be there." "And Raymond too," Alice replied, peering at the street through a gap in the curtain. "Do you think he'll dare?" "I don't think he'll miss it. But today, Beatrice, it's not about him." At 10 o'clock sharp, they arrived at the registry. The office was large, with marble floors and a receptionist in a suit. The signing room had a long wooden table with cushioned chairs and a hanging lamp in the center. Already there were Mr. Peterson, the public notary, 2 representatives from the state registry, and the legal buyer, an elderly man named Mr. James Vance, a neighbor from Pennsylvania who bought properties to turn them into retirement homes. Upon learning of the conflict, he refused to sign until everything was cleared up. "Mrs. Alice," James greeted respectfully, "I'm glad to see you standing firm. Today we either sign or we don't sign at all. Thank you for not letting yourself be deceived. The house should belong to the one who defended it with her life." Alice sat down, placed her ID, her original will, and the new document Walter had left in a sealed envelope, the one confirming that after her death, the house should pass to a person who had accompanied and cared for her. And that name was already registered, Beatrice Solis. The official read aloud, "The previous purchase agreement is hereby nullified. Any fraudulent transfer attempt is canceled, and the sole legal owner remains Mrs. Alice Gutierrez, and the designated heir with ratified legal validity is Mrs. Beatrice Solis." Alice took the pen and signed in black ink on a sealed page with a steady hand. 5 minutes later, the door flew open. Raymond entered. His hair was disheveled, his jacket slung over his arm, and his eyes were red. "This is illegal," he shouted, walking towards the table. "You have no right to decide over my family." Mr. Peterson stood up. "Mr. Raymond, I urge you to remain calm. You no longer have any authority over this property. That house is mine. No, you tried to steal it. My father built it for us." And he also wrote that he would not leave it in the hands of those who would try to sell it while his wife was alive. And you not only tried to sell it, you tried to make it disappear. Raymond lunged at the table, but before he could touch a single paper, 2 private security officers stopped him. They removed him without hitting him, but firmly. Beatrice didn't move, just lowered her gaze. Alice didn't either, until he turned from the doorway, his face contorted and his voice choked. "You took everything from me, Mom, everything," Alice replied without shouting. "No, son, you let it all go on your own." It was over. The lies, the forgeries, the cruelty, all defeated by the quiet strength of one woman who refused to be erased. With those final, powerful words to her son, Alice closed a painful chapter of her life, But what does the future hold for her and Beatrice now that they finally have peace? Let's find out. At 11:20, the signature was ratified. The notary sealed the papers. The official signed the closure of the file, and the buyer left with a sincere bow. The process was closed. The house still belonged to Alice, and its destiny was no longer in the hands of those who didn't know how to value it. But before leaving the office, Beatrice stopped in front of the lawyer. And Veronica? Disappeared. Changed her number. Didn't show up for the summons. Hasn't responded to any official notification. And Raymond is under investigation for forgery, document fraud, and identity theft. Alice took a deep breath. For the first time, the air entered her lungs clean. Let's go home, Beatrice. Are you sure? Yes. Today, I want to sweep the patio. That same afternoon, when they returned from the registry with the final sealed documents, Alice asked for something simple. I want to sit outside, in front of the lemon tree. Beatrice placed an old wooden bench under the shade, the same one Walter had made with his own hands. Alice walked slowly in her flat sandals and linen dress. The sun softly touched her face. Her eyes, though marked by the years, shone with a peace that hadn't been seen in a long time. I never thought this day would come, Alice said, looking at the green branches of the tree. But it did, Beatrice replied, and no one can take it away from you. Cole came out with a tray, 2 glasses of water with ice, and some cookies he had bought with his own savings. He sat next to his mother in silence, like a child who understands that there are no words that can heal, but there is a presence that can reconcile. Thank you for not letting go of me, he said. You never truly left, son. The house was calm. For the first time in years, Raymond and Veronica were forced to leave the property under judicial custody. The sale was completely annulled. The corrupt judge was removed from his position, and the fake real estate company was shut down for fraud. Neither of them ever knocked on the door again. Days later, Alice called a locksmith. She changed the locks, not to close the house to others, but to open it to a new chapter. This house isn't big, she told Beatrice, but it has more history than square feet, and you're not carrying it alone anymore. Alice decided to write a letter. She left it inside the Bible, next to Walter's portrait. To whoever reads this, a house is built with wood and bricks, but a home is built with respect. For many years, I lived in a house that was no longer a home. I thought my story was over, but I learned that it is never too late to find your voice, even if it's just a whisper at first. I didn't win a war against my children. I won a battle for myself. I recovered my dignity. If you ever feel invisible, if fear makes you silent, remember this. Your story is yours to tell. And your voice, no matter how long it has been quiet, has the power to rebuild your world from the foundations up, with dignity, with memory, and with truth. And so, sitting under the lemon tree, Alice looked up. You know, Walter, you didn't give me gold, but you gave me your word, and that saved me. Beatrice sat beside her. Do you want me to put on some music? No, just stay like this, quietly. Months passed, and Alice's house gradually found its inherent peace once more. The healing process was not a straight line. There were days when the image of the padlock on the fridge or the harsh words from her children would return, stinging like an old wound. Alice didn't try to erase these painful memories. Instead, she learned to face them, viewing them as part of the journey she had endured, a testament to the hidden strength she never knew she possessed. Forgiveness, for Alice, was not about forgetting, but about choosing not to let a bitter past dictate her future. She forgave her children not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Gradually, the weight on her heart lessened, making way for a sense of freeing serenity. Her story is a reminder of the power of resilience and forgiveness. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel to join us for more meaningful journeys.